Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
I am not, Ashkral said seriously. Why do you think I have chosen you? Your situation is far too compatible with my unique seed. Without eyes, the void seed will be able to extract the dark energy residing within the spiritual bridge of darkness. Wait, we are in the presence of dark energy now. How come this is the first time I am hearing about it? Levi raised an eyebrow in surprise as he extended his senses around him, trying to feel it, but failing every time. Because dark energy can be utilized only by those with bloodline or evolutionary traits related to it. Across the entire shadow dimension, only a few remaining royal bloodlines with its affinity are still alive. You may not possess as great of an affinity as them, but your permanent exposure to the spiritual darkness bridge since childhood has helped you improve your affinity. Ashkral clarified, this is a unique trait only you humans have. In the case of night crawlers, it doesn't matter if they spent their entire lives in a different environment. They won't be able to grow an affinity for that said environment. They're locked with what they are born with. Levi nodded in understanding as he had read about this subject in great detail in his mother's textbooks. He understood that night crawlers came with seemingly infinite types of species, each one stranger than the other. Some species had amazing affinities to poison, sand, earth, wind, ice, and some even had affinities to peculiar elements such as fog, glass, bones, gold, and such. The only elements the night crawlers were cursed to not wield were the ones related to light, such as fire, magma, lightning, or even plants. It wasn't like they couldn't wield them exactly, but they could not produce light radiation. For example, lightning would become dark lightning, or normal flames would turn into black flames. Just like the black wooden umbrella, it was created out of wood, but it was dead black wood that could not absorb light at all. With the void seed, you will be more than capable of tapping into this infinite source of dark energy and use it to slowly feed it or even refuel it to utilize its related abilities. Ashkral added, that sounds good, but what am I supposed to do with the other two seeds? Levi frowned. Since I need to keep growing them simultaneously, this means I need to be just as good at cultivating them as well. Levi's concerns were in place. He understood that while the void seed would not be lacking in the energy department, he couldn't replicate the same consistency with the other two seeds, especially the sun seed. After all, it was more or less similar to Shadow Life seed as it needed sunlight to grow, and this was one of Levi's greatest struggles without eyes. Don't worry, my 9 senses seed can grow by feeding it any source of energy available. It accepts everything and rejects none. However, since it can feed on everything, it requires tenfold the amount of energy when compared to the other two seeds. Ashkral shared, any type of energy? Levi was amazed. Levi understood that the world and the shadow dimension were filled with all sorts of peculiar potent energy sources, which were still being studied as they were speaking. If he could grow those energy sources, his 9 senses seed would be dealt with properly too. What about the sun seed? Levi knitted his eyebrows, knowing that it was the only seed that Ashkral shouldn't have a solution for unless he wanted him to grow through abusing growth totems and such sources. While it was doable, Levi knew he would need to hunt down night crawlers 24/7 to collect their crystallized seeds and trade them for solar Aegis coins. Even then, he wouldn't be able to secure a constant supply of growth totems since the solar Aegis sanctuary used a unique system, where their resources were handled based on each holy region's rank. The Holy Heliodor's region rank worldwide was somewhat in the lower middle of the barrel, which meant their quota for all types of totems was extremely limited. Because of this, the government ensured the purchase of most of their stock and resold it to the rest of the daywalkers at an increased price of solar Aegis coins. Yet, the described situation was the most favorable. In reality, the government prioritized selling the best of totems to private agencies, lineage families, governors, and anyone with a connection to the government, like the Anti-Sleepwalkers Department, the Outpost Defenders, and such. In simpler terms, obtaining totems was an extremely difficult and pricey endeavor. That was why Jamal and Sergio were pissed at the thought of employing them as bait. You have been taught your entire life that without eyes, you're a failure as a daywalker. Ashkral said bitterly. Poor thing, you have no idea what you are truly capable of. But you were one of the main people abusing me cause of it, making me remember every day how foolish of me to dream of becoming a daywalk. Sheesh, there was no such a thing. Ashkral shushed Levi with a wing near his spiritual mouth. Then he said, all I did was try to motivate you. Look at how far you came. Levi's eyebrows twitched at his shamelessness. For anyone else, losing their eyes might be considered as the end of their daywalker's dream, but you are different. Levi knitted his eyebrows in intrigue. Different? Are you saying this to make me feel good? You know that's one thing I will never do. Ashkral frowned, acting like he was insulted by his remark. True, your mouth is disabled when it comes to compliments. Levi nodded. Have you ever wondered why your eyes were stolen? Ashkral suddenly asked, have you wondered why no eye replacement surgery worked on you, even with all the technological development? Every single day, Levi squinted his scorch marks. After a thorough digging into the public data in the network, Levi had found some information that showed his situation wasn't quite unique. It was the signature motto of an infamous hidden organization called the Duskbound Order. He had heard that they were mainly employed as hitmen and assassins to high-profile daywalkers or civilians. Once the deed was completed, they would either remove the eyes of the next living entity to the target, whether it was a child, an animal, a maid, or even an unrelated stranger. If no one but the target was available, they would remove the eyes of the corpse. This was everything he knew about them, and one of his goals was to reach a higher authoritative status to find their classified data and know who had put a target on his parents. As for the eye replacement surgery, the doctors had already tried everything on Levi when he was a child, and nothing worked. Even Arthur had volunteered to donate one of his eyes for Levi, so both of them would have a chance at seeing the world. Unfortunately, even when they were blood-related, his eyes weren't compatible with Levi's. In fact, nothing was. This peculiar situation had driven the doctors to seek a different alternative, such as a cybernetic eye. Yet, to their shock, his body rejected it as well. It was like his body wanted only his stolen eyes and nothing else. Not even using high-grade recovery totems was able to regrow his eyes. While I don't know if the Duskbound Order were targeting your parents, and you ended up as collateral damage, I do know one thing. Ashkral dropped a bombshell calmly. Your bloodline may not be 100% human, and there's a chance they have found out about it. Huh. Levi was startled. He had been listening to Ashkral for a while now, and throughout all the crazy stuff he uttered, this topped it. Not 100% human? Levi just failed to believe him. I understand your misgivings, and to be honest, I am not really too sure if my assumption is correct. Ashkral replied, we will find out at night. What do you mean? There is no point in explaining it now. We will check if I am correct or not once night falls. I have a foolproof method. Ashkral said, for now, you should focus on 3 goals. Get rid of any suspicion that might implicate you in the harrowing forest massacre. Reach stage 1 in the 9 senses evolutionary path to unlock your first weapon and ability. And lastly, participate in the upcoming assembly to launder our partnership. Levi could only nod his head in understanding, putting the bloodline issue at the back of his mind for now. He had much bigger problems to solve, and one of them was surviving the upcoming interrogation. I will return at night. I can't be seen with you in public, not before our contract becomes official. Sensing the approaching of multiple auras, Ashkral closed his eye and exited the bridge of darkness, returning to the shadow dimension. After a few moments, the room's door slid open. Shia, Sergio, and Jamal entered the room with flowers, balloons, and many packages of chocolate. Of course, Shia was holding nothing but a popsicle in her mouth. When they saw Levi sitting on his bed with the wind gently playing with his messy hair, their eyes lit up in delight. Levi, you are finally awake. Shia was the first to rush him and give him a tight hug. Levi was startled at first, as he hated getting touched by people out of nowhere. As a blind person, it felt like his comfort zone was invaded against his will. But, knowing that it was Shia, he relaxed his shoulders and accepted her hug with a serene smile. You have been sleeping so long we started getting worried. Jamal shared as he dropped the gifts on the side of the bed. No one invaded your dreams? Just tell me what they look like, and I will handle them. Shia asked coldly while pulling away from Levi. Thanks for your concerns, but I had a great sleep. Levi smiled. Good. We would have stayed to watch over you, but we were called to assist with the investigation efforts, Sergio said calmly as he went to kick Arthur's couch, waking him up from his coma. Once his muddled eyes settled on the light and saw his brother up, he yawned lazily and asked, Big bro, you good? Never felt better. Good. Wake me up in an hour or two. Okay. Then, he closed his eyes and went back to sleep, snoring soundly. Levi wasn't bothered by his reaction, as this was how they dealt with checking on each other. As long as the other party was alive and well, there was no need to make a big deal of it. Shia and the others didn't judge Arthur's reaction, as they had seen him stay around Levi ever since he woke up, uncaring that some of his wounds were still untreated. They said that love was actions, and ever since they hung around the Larson brothers, they had seen nothing but a tight brotherhood, which they envied greatly. Can you update me? Levi requested. I will tell you exactly what we heard after we woke up and found ourselves in the hospital. Shia went on and shared how the harrowing forest incident had caused a massive uproar across the entire holy region, even the capital's governor getting wind of it. If it hadn't been for Sir Feng Ling, who was situated at the nearest outpost and making an early move to save as many survivors as possible, the incident would have shocked even the nearby holy regions. Sir Feng Ling was there. Levi was taken aback. Yep, isn't he the coolest? Jamal said with an odd tone. I have heard he's gathered all the survivors and placed them on a giant wind boat, taking us straight to Tamara's settlement hospital. He didn't even wait for rescuers to come. Levi didn't hear the rest of what he said, as the moment he received his confirmation, he was assaulted with faint, broken memories of that dreadful night. He could remember hearing the faint, agitated voices of 3 men as he was being carried on someone's back. He was at that moment constantly fainting and waking up, allowing him to hear some jumbled sentences here and there. But one memory stuck in his mind, and he never forgot it. If only I came faster, your parents might have been still alive. I'm sorry, I am sorry. It was Feng Ling weeping silently and apologizing from the bottom of his heart, as if he was responsible for their death. Levi had never understood why he did that. Why did he cry or even show this much emotion to a random child? He had searched Feng Ling's public data, and he found out that he wasn't a man of nonsense or such rich emotions. He always seemed cold, depressed, and couldn't care less. Yet, Levi sensed the agonizing pain and guilt of failing to save his family even when he had nothing to do with it. This always intrigued him, but he ended up dropping it eventually. I'm glad we had him on our side. Levi smiled in appreciation and then asked, What about the public? Well, the government has settled with sharing this version with the public, Shia said calmly, like it was a normal occurrence to keep the public in the dark. As the daughter of Morningstar's lineage family, she had access to many secrets that would scare the citizens straight. We were the only ones seeing the monstrous entity that is believed to have killed all the spiders. Shia felt chills after being reminded of Ashkral's appearance. We have been forced to give access to our Neuralens recorded data and also sign a nocturnal contract to keep the information a secret. Did Arthur sign it too? Levi asked. Yes, but he was kind of useless to the investigation team. Sergio nodded. He was already passed out when the development has taken place. Don't worry. You will also be ruled out swiftly since you don't record with your Neuralens. Jamal assured him. I see. Levi wasn't too sure about Jamal's confidence, as he knew that he had enough information on Ashkral to implicate him. Blind or not, he understood that they wouldn't show mercy and would use all possible means to extract any useful information from him. So, he had to be careful about it. May I ask who is leading the investigation unit? Levi inquired. Since Sir Feng Ling has played a great role in saving us and was the first to bring footage of everything that went down, he was appointed the investigation unit head. Jamal added disappointedly, If I knew he was the guard appointed at the outpost gate, I would have gotten his autograph. It's never too late. He is still in the hospital. Sergio smirked. F***CK off. You're trying to get me disciplined? Jamal's eyelids twitched, knowing that. Approaching a high-ranked governmental daywalker on duty for such a crap might result in terrible consequences, especially when he was involved in a serious investigation. If he is still in the hospital, I believe it's best I go visit him and deal with the matter as soon as possible. Levi shared while trying to stand up, but Shia and the others pushed him back and told him that Sir Fengling was still making rounds and would be here in a few hours at best. Hearing this, Levi decided to wait for him. What about the crystal blood flower and its variation? Levi smiled bitterly. We have gone through so much trouble, and we haven't found a single one. I'm sorry it ended like this. While it's unfortunate, not all was lost. Shia smirked. I use my connections to ensure that we receive at least 30% of the slain spider's crystallized seeds. You did. Levi was surprised. He understood that the wastelands followed the rules of the jungle most of the time. In other words, the rescuers would be the ones collecting the crystallized seeds off the spider's corpses after the survivors were taken away. Those crystallized seeds would go straight to the government's treasury. To obtain such a big chunk of crystallized seeds implied that her father must have definitely interfered. As expected, Shia went on and told him that her father had made sure not to get them ripped off after almost getting killed to clear the forest. 30% of the total turnover has rewarded us with 400 crystallized seeds of mostly Tier 1 flesh-eating spiders. Shia shared. That's good to hear. Levi sighed in relief. I believe it should be enough to buy you all the necessary materials for your perfect evolution. What are you talking about? Shia lowered her orange sunglasses and said, You think I'm planning to get all of it? I'm not that vile. We decided to split it evenly amongst each other. You and Arthur included. Huh? You sure? Levi was genuinely stunned. He had expected to receive money for their troubles since they were still civilians. Most daywalkers do the same, rewarding their staff and subordinates with credits to keep as many crystallized seeds as possible. It was understandable considering that crystallized seeds were traded with Solar Aegis coins, the official worldwide coin for purchasing anything related to daywalkers. You kidding? You guys might not have been daywalkers, but I would rather have you on my team than most daywalkers. Sergio said solemnly. If even the cheapskate Sergio agreed to it, there was no point in asking the others. Don't think of us as strangers. Jamal smiled as he patted Levi's shoulder. We have gone through hell and came back alive. Nothing builds a stronger bond than surviving death together. They're right. You guys are now part of our squad, whether you like it or not. Shia grinned. We would be honored. Upon hearing this, Levi chuckled while nodding in understanding, not rejecting their offer. After fighting amidst them and seeing how they had each other's backs, he knew it was foolish to pass on such an opportunity, especially when the Blood Hunters Agency was the second strongest in the entire region, and just being in contact with them was a blessing everyone wished for. Since you guys are showing us love, I don't mind telling you the truth. Levi confessed with a smile. I don't need a whole 6 crystal blood flowers, just 1 and the rest of the mentioned materials. I figured you would be trying to swindle me out of some flowers, but a whole 5? Shia was astonished. You sure are merciless. It was a common occurrence for evolutionist experts to swindle the daywalkers of a higher required amount of materials. Since those daywalkers who sought after perfect and remarkable evolutions were always loaded, they seldom cared. All they wanted was for the evolution to succeed, and if the price was much higher than standard, so be it. Of course, this worked only when considering new evolutions found and not the known ones. As you said, we are struggling with money. Levi chuckled. While I have no interest in selling my mother's knowledge, I don't mind earning money other ways. Smart. If I were in your place, I would have gotten much more. Sergio rubbed his hands shamelessly, dreaming of the day he landed on such precious knowledge. Shia and Jamal's eyelids twitched, knowing that he would be an absolute menace. If it's just 1 crystal blood flower, obsidian blood vine, and the rest of the materials, I should have them ready in 3 days at most. The Sunstrike Agency must have an overflow after clearing the Nest treasury and will sell some of them below the market price in the region. Shia smiled widely in anticipation after obtaining the necessary funds, crystallized seeds. Although she was filthy rich, she knew it was a bad investment to trade credits for SA coins. The exchange rate was absolutely abysmal, making it extremely easy for daywalkers to get rich off selling SA coins, but the opposite for the buyers. That's why Levi wanted to swindle 5 crystal flowers, knowing that if he traded them for SA coins, he would have the choice of possessing both credits and coins for future necessities. Though, he would never cheat someone who took him in and treated him as a friend. Don't even mention friends who he had fought alongside and survived to the bitter end with them. It would take one with great evil and immorality to do this. I am about to evolve perfectly, and you guys aren't. You bums should address me with respect after 3 days. Meanwhile, Bleeder was seen making a little dance in excitement, irritating Oro and Othner to no end. For Nightcrawlers, evolution was everything to them. To have a perfect evolution in this climate? Phew, some Nightcrawlers and Daywalkers would actually become depressed for days from envy. Sergio, you useless fatty. How come Bleeder gets to have a perfect evolution while you are still struggling with a mere remarkable evolution? Othner chided in frustration. The F*** you want me to do? He got lucky, we didn't. Sergio retorted. Levi, did you somehow hear anything related to my evolutionary path? Oro went ahead and requested Levi with a hopeful tone. While Levi knew that Ashkrell might have an idea about their evolution, he still shook his head with a wry smile. My apologies. I have learned only Bleeder's species' evolutionary path. I see. Oro and Othner were left disappointed, but they didn't take it on Levi, knowing that such information could be obtained only through luck or trial and error. That's why being an evolutionist was a highly coveted and respected career. They needed to be extremely intelligent and have great knowledge about nightcrawlers and their infinite species. Additionally, learn about natural treasures and how they react to each other and nightcrawlers to create the best formula for their evolution. They were mostly hired privately by lineage families and agencies to search for the best evolutionary paths for their top daywalkers. After a short while, Shia and the others left Levi to rest in peace. She had told him that she would contact him once she got her hands on the materials. She also assured him that she was actively working on getting the recommendation letter to participate in the assembly. While she and the others were still on the fence about this, as she knew that the assembly involved battles, they didn't want to discourage Levi anymore. If he wanted to join, let him be, and he would figure out on his own. Also, just when she was about to leave, she told him to check their nocturnal contract details. Levi murmured the serial number of the contract in his mind, and it manifested before him, leaving him quite fascinated. What a mystery! Levi knew that no matter how much he thought about it, he could not figure out how the nocturnal contracts worked. It was a mystery unsolved by even the Nightcrawlers. Thus, he could only be amazed and move on. After reading the terms, he was left stunned at the change of the penalty applied to him. He would no longer be punished by becoming Shia's lifetime subordinate. Instead, if he failed, he would be hired for 3 years in their agency. When Levi looked at the bottom and saw that Shia had already signed a modification, he couldn't help but smile. She's quite kind when she wants to. Levi went on and removed his penalty in case she failed to help him get the recommendation letter. In his mind, there was no point for the contract to be binding and should act as a mere formality between them now that their relationship had developed beyond strangers. If she failed to help him get the recommendation, so be it. He was already a daywalker, and he would find out a different method to make his contract legit. After signing his name, he sent her a message to check the contract. A few moments later, Astra AI reported femininely. She has sent a thumbs-up emoji. The new contract was signed, leaving both Levi and Shia to their own characters. If they were pieces of shit, they would take advantage of this and not fulfill their ends of the deal. If they were true to themselves and their words meant more than a signature, then nothing would change. 1 hour later, Levi and Arthur were seen stretching on the hospital's room floor, helping each other when needed. Levi had yet to tell him about Ashkrell and his Daywalker's contract, as he knew that they might be monitored. I missed 3 days of the gym now. I'm already feeling like my muscles have shrunken. Arthur complained while flexing his biceps, touching them with a saddened look. That's just your body dysmorphia doing its thing. Levi replied calmly while stretching his legs. You think? Arthur sighed, trying his best to ignore the nagging of his mind, telling him that he had gotten smaller and weaker. Just as Levi was about to assure him, he lifted his head to the sight of a small black cat floating in front of him. Hello, kid. Remember me? Mao greeted with a smile and a paw extended forward for a handshake. Oh, hello. Levi shook her hand and said, I believe you are Madame Fengzhimao. He knew that she was Feng Ling's contracted nightcrawler, as it was known information, but he didn't remember seeing her anywhere close before. Mao seemed to have figured it out from his reaction and murmured, I guess you were too drugged to remember. Before Levi could respond, Feng Ling came through the door with one woman and one man on his side. They were wearing black outfits with light stripes on the shoulders and the waist. They had a police-like hat on with a symbol in front. The same symbol was on their vest chest and their pants, near a belt with attached 5 bags. On the right side of their pants, they carried a wooden page pistol with millions of tiny inscriptions. One look was all it took for anyone to feel their authoritative presence, the presence that came with working for the government. Othman, Samira, I have this covered. Feng Ling waved his hand at them, and the two saluted by tapping 3 fingers on their chest. Then they exited, waiting outside the room. Arthur. Yep, see you shortly. Arthur stood up and exited the room, leaving his brother alone with Feng Ling. After he walked away, Levi watched as Feng Ling approached him with a tint of astonishment, gazing at his overwhelming but controlled spiritual aura. It was gray and moved akin to the wind in the middle of spring. While it was nowhere near 1% of the horrific Ashkral's scarlet aura, it still made Levi understand that Feng Ling was a master of his craft. Sensing a peculiar gaze on him, Feng Ling raised an eyebrow in surprise as he stared at Levi's scorched marks underneath his messy hair. You can see me? Feng Ling asked straight away. Only your spiritual aura. Levi answered politely. Interesting. Feng Ling stood in front of Levi and made a number with his hand. Then, he waved it while asking him if he could see what he was doing. You were making a peace sign and waving it in a semicircle. Levi shared. This left both Mao and Feng Ling amazed, understanding that none of this was normal. Not even a Warden Daywalker was capable of seeing other people's spiritual auras, as it needed an undisputed level of hard work and talent to iron one's spiritual vision to this degree. Yet, a teenage kid without any enhancement to his spiritual prowess or energy was already at that level. You are quite gifted, Feng Ling complimented. If you were to become a Daywalker, I highly suggest you choose the Psyche specialization. Thank you, but Levi suddenly lifted his head in a daze. You think I can become one? This was the first time in his life he heard someone encourage him to become a Daywalker despite his disadvantaged position. Everyone else either laughed at him, mocked him, or discouraged him, fearing that he might get hurt. Why not? Feng Ling walked to the window and gazed into the distance. In my home region in the Far East, I have seen much stranger miracles. You might not have eyes, and this will affect your chances greatly with nightcrawlers. But I am certain that despite anyone's condition, there's always a nightcrawler with a set of skills that weaponize their supposed weakness. He paused. I have seen it with my own eyes. Thank you. You have no idea how much I needed to hear that. Levi smiled in appreciation. Although he was already a Daywalker, he still felt a wave of security washing over him at the idea that someone like Feng Ling believed in him. Now, let's get this over with so we can get you discharged. Feng Ling turned around and brought 2 chairs, helping Levi sit on one and then sitting in front of him. He brought out a holographic screen and asked calmly, First, was your Neuralens device on during the incident? Yes, but I wasn't utilizing its scanning capabilities to save on battery. Levi answered, I didn't know how long we would remain in the forest, so I was being cautious. I see. Feng Ling nodded. He didn't think much of what Levi did, as he knew that there was a massive difference between recording with the lens and the device's scanning abilities. The lens wasted almost no energy since it was visual feedback, but using a scan was different. The device had to scan every single rock, twig, drop of water, and the rest of the details to paint a vivid scene for Levi. This devoured a great quantity of energy. Of course, there were many roundabouts to avoid this and still use visual input, like wearing glasses with a tiny camera linked to the device or such. But Feng Ling didn't ask Levi about them, as he knew that it was the smartest thing Levi could do. If it was up to him, he would also get rid of the lens that was recording every detail of his life and storing it. Even if there were many measures to protect his privacy, he still hated this sensation of being monitored at all times. Unlike everyone else, Levi had an actual excuse to not wear the lens. One could say it was one of the few things being blind in this era was good for. Thus, he moved on from this subject and continued his questioning. Share with me your experience in the harrowing forest. With pleasure, Levi nodded, willing to cooperate. Levi went on and narrated almost every single detail from the moment he met Shia, and even mentioned their deal, as he knew that Shia and the others couldn't lie about it even if they wanted. Of course, his contract with Shia involved this exception, so she wouldn't suffer from the consequences of breaching the contract. Everyone participating in the forest had their data of the incident breached by the investigation squad to find out if there were any sleepwalkers or fallen daywalkers amongst them. While this was a huge breach of privacy, no one but the investigation squad had the right to the data. They were also under contractual obligations to keep it to themselves unless the mentioned data was used for the investigation. Feng Ling merely kept listening to him while scratching his messy beard, uncaring about him possessing information on bleeder species Tier 3 perfect evolution. He didn't even react much when he heard that Levi went this far to secure a recommendation letter to join the assembly. It was like he expected this much from him. However, when Levi finally reached the finale and mentioned the creepy-looking Ashkrell, Feng Ling fixed his posture immediately. You saw him too? He asked solemnly. Yes, it's hard to forget him when he is one of the ugliest entities I have ever seen in my life. Levi didn't hesitate to trash-talk Ashkrell, still heated over the tattoo. Did you see what he did to the spiders, or Lurker Queen? Or were you passed out like the others? Feng Ling inquired. Matter of fact, I did. Levi confessed. Feng Ling and Mao were taken aback by his response. They immediately leaned closer, their expressions turning as serious as they could be. Tell us everything, spare no detail, Mao said. All I remember is that Tier 3 Nightcrawler piercing my stomach with a log and throwing me back to my friends. After a few moments, I find myself all healed and waking up to the sight of that creepy entity standing inside the solar dome. Inside the solar dome? Feng Ling narrowed his eyes. Did he seem hurt? Burnt? Anything? I don't know. I can only see his spiritual aura, and it was beyond terrifying. Levi shook a bit, feeling a chill coursing down his spine at the memory of Ashkral's scarlet aura. Seeing his natural response, Feng Ling and Mao could tell that he was being truthful. If you were to compare my aura with him, how big is the difference? Feng Ling unchained the limits on his aura, allowing it to run wild. Levi showed an astonished look as he gazed at Feng Ling's spiritual aura spinning around him like an apocalyptic hurricane. Compared to other daywalkers, Feng Ling was clearly in a different realm. Yet, I'm impressed, but not terrified. Levi responded truthfully. Is that enough of a description? It's more than enough. Feng Ling nodded in understanding as he resealed his spiritual aura. I believe our assumption was wrong. Mao disclosed sternly that monstrous entity might be a Tier 8 Nightcrawler or above. She knew that Feng Ling's spiritual aura rivaled that of a Tier 6 Nightcrawler, even though he was still a solar-bound daywalker. For his aura to be called impressive, while Ashkral was terrifying, it made them understand that it had to belong to an entity above Tier 7. I feel the same. Feng Ling nodded, and then told Levi to continue with his narration. Levi went on and told them how he watched all the spiders' spiritual auras disappear after a single command from Ashkral. Of course, he wasn't using his name in his narration, always giving him a horrible adjective. Then he passed out before he knew it and didn't wake up until he was in the hospital. He made sure not to link any relationship with Ashcrowl, as he knew that he would put a giant target on his back if he were known to have a connection with the harrowing forest incident. Nelves told them that someone had placed a hit on Shia, which made him understand that this went beyond Nightcrawlers/humans' eternal war. If he was known to have anything to do with the failure of the assassination or the survival of 60% of Daywalkers, he understood that he might not make it to next week. I believe that's all I have. I apologize if I wasn't much of help. Levi said. No, you did enough. Feng Ling nodded in appreciation as he stood up. Then, he patted Levi on the shoulder and told him to give him a call if he remembered anything else. As he was about to leave the room, Feng Ling heard Levi's grateful voice. Sir Feng Ling, I have never gotten the chance to thank you properly for saving me that night. Truly, I am deeply grateful and will always be. When Feng Ling heard this, he turned around to see Levi bowing his head in his direction while seated. I deserve no thanks. All I did was deliver you to the hospital that night. Feng Ling said expressionlessly, Don't feel indebted to me. I am not your savior. Then, he left the hospital's room, never looking back. Othman and Samira followed him along while Arthur swiftly entered the room. After the door closed, he asked curiously, How did it go? Great, Levi replied with a satisfactory look, but in his mind, he knew that his efforts were suboptimal at best. As expected, Feng Ling and Mao were onto him. That boy is hiding something, Mao said calmly while sitting on top of Feng Ling's shoulder. Yes, but he isn't involved in the massacre. Feng Ling nodded. He is also a victim. I thought so too. He might know that entity and doesn't want to rat him out. Or he was forced to keep his mouth shut. Yes, it's too much of a coincidence that he showed up to save everyone just when the kid's stomach was pierced, leaving him hanging on a thread. Mao said, plus, Solar Dome and recovery totems aren't enough to close such a wound in a few seconds. He healed him exclusively. That entity saved him, and we don't know why. Feng Ling narrowed his eyes. We should keep an eye on him, but not now. Mao suggested, we must avoid linking him to the massacre's failure for his safety. Feng Ling nodded in agreement. He was certain that this massacre was orchestrated by a higher-up in the region based on his findings related to Malik, Dire Webra, and even Nelves. This was no laughing matter, as it meant their holy region was compromised. This was a much more significant problem than finding out about Ashcrowl and his relation to Levi. After all, Ashcrowl might be dangerous or not to their region, but a higher-up mole? The harrowing forest massacre was nothing but an appetizer. Let's keep an eye out for the upcoming High Council meeting. We will be summoned to report the progress of our investigation of the harrowing forest massacre before all upper echelons of the region. Feng Ling narrowed his eyes coldly. The mole will most definitely be there. Many hours later, Levi and Arthur were discharged from the hospital at last, returning straight to their apartment. Home sweet home. Arthur smiled in bliss as he fell face first on the living room's couch. But as he thought back to what happened in the forest, his urge to relax evaporated instantly. He swiftly sat straight and requested with a solemn tone, Big bro, can you recommend some books about totems? Levi raised an eyebrow in surprise. Is this related to that time? This was the first time that he was asked about anything related to studying by his brother. This made him connect the dots to the time Arthur failed to activate the recovery totem due to not knowing the incantation. Yes. Arthur tightened his fists on top of his lap. I always assumed that strength is king, and that as long as I keep lifting weights and working hard, the moment I become a daywalker, I will stomp through everything, but it seems like I was too childish in my vision of how strength is. Arthur lifted his head and looked at his big brother. His eyes were slightly watery, but no tears were coming out. Do you know what nightmare I had when I slept in the hospital? No. Levi shook his head. It was of you, leaning against the tree with your arms busted and blood pouring out of your mouth nonstop, instead of Shia. Arthur narrated his pain. I was sitting in front of you, with a recovery totem in my hand, the only miracle medicine that will save you. Yet I stood there, mouth slightly agape, having no clue how to use it. I even asked Astra AI for help, but all she was repeating, connection lost, connection lost. All I could do is watch you bleed to death. Arthur looked at his giant hand that could break stones with a punch and smiled helplessly. I don't know if the nightmare was installed in me by a nightcrawler or not, but the dread, the despair, the incompetence I felt to be defeated by a sentence, I could never forget it, and I will never do. Levi smiled in gratification as he listened to his brother's troubles. He never had any intention of bringing up the moment Arthur choked at such a critical moment, wanting to see if it bothered him or not. Clearly, it did more than bother him. He couldn't sleep, and he would probably be visited by the same nightmare for the upcoming days if he didn't take SR pills. Great Nightcrawler's manipulators knew exactly where to hit one when he was down. In our life, mistakes are given, Levi said calmly while walking to the kitchen to cook something for them. To reach greatness, your road has to be imperfect, filled with potholes, and broken all over. As we tread on it, we learn where to step, when to walk or stop, and when to jump. Sometimes our choices will be wrong, and we will pay the price, but as long as we correct them and keep on moving, we will eventually become the best version of ourselves. Levi smiled gently as a memory of their mother surfaced in his mind while making omelets. Just like what Mother used to say, mistakes either make us or break us. As he finished off the 8-egg omelet plate, Levi went to the living room and placed it in front of his brother, who was sitting with his head lowered. We are the Larsons. Mistakes may crack us, but never break us, Levi added sternly. So lift your head and eat. You will need the energy for the books I have prepared for you. Then, he returned to the kitchen to cook for himself, listening to the faint sniffles of his little brother and the fork hitting the plate. Although he was built like a tank, Arthur was still a 16-year-old child. What he went through was no regular situation to just laugh at and move on. A squad mate almost died in his hands because he was too lazy to read. Although he was still a civilian, such unreliability in the wastelands was a death sentence. Levi was glad that Arthur realized the importance of knowledge this early. He knew that regardless of what he said, it would never move his brother as much as him falling into the mistake personally. For some strange reason, regardless of how many warnings we received that something was hot, we humans only learn once we get burned. Sometime later, Levi was seen sitting on the balcony, enjoying the calm breeze of spring with a cup of old traditional Moroccan tea. While many countries had declined after the fall of civilization and the establishment of the New World System, some cultures remained strong. Right now, he was waiting for night to fall and Ashkral to make an appearance while thinking deeply about everything he had learned a while ago about his seeds. On the other side of the apartment, Arthur was locked shut in his room, cramming everything he had skipped in school about totems, natural treasures, and such important knowledge. Levi knew that his brother genuinely had difficulties with studying. So, he hooked him up with simple books, such as Solar Totems for Dummies, to not overwhelm him. I heard you almost got killed in the harrowing forest. Kakik, that's what you get for acting tough in the wastelands. Give the kid a break. He can't see, so he might have waddled outside, and he had no clue about it. Kakakak, good one. While it seemed to everyone else that Levi was taking a relaxing tea break, in reality, he was being disturbed by a group of nightcrawlers. Levi had interacted with them before. They had tried too many times to seduce him, but to no avail. For nightcrawlers, such failure was quite humiliating. Thus, occasionally, some of them would hang around Levi to annoy him as payback. But Levi didn't even give them an ounce of attention. He kept sipping the hot mint tea while brooding over the topic of his non-human bloodline. I always knew that my parents' origin isn't precisely Northern African, but I assumed it would be European or Western. Levi rubbed his chin thoughtfully, but non-human? Was he implying that I might possess a bloodline from a different dimensional race like Nightcrawlers or those behind Solar Aegis Sanctuary? With the limited access he had to knowledge, Levi knew that no matter how hard he pondered on the subject, his findings were inconclusive. He could only shake his head and be patient, awaiting Ashkral's arrival. Sometime later, as Levi was being annoyed by the Nightcrawlers on the balcony, Ashkral's terrifying cold voice resounded in the area. Trash! Haven't I warned you not to show your faces here again? Scram before I erase your existence. T, he is here. The instant the Nightcrawlers picked up on his bone-chilling order, their expressions turned grim, and they swiftly exited the bridge of darkness. They didn't even wait to see Ashcrow, as they had witnessed what he was capable of and heard much worse rumors. After the area around Levi was cleared, he lifted his head to see Ashcrow appearing from a distance, flapping his tiny wings, barely able to lift himself. Levi stared at him with quivering lips. If the night crawlers stayed behind and saw what the demon had turned to, his authority and reputation would be thrown down the gutter in a second. What? You never saw a handsome bat before? Ashcrow sneered as he sat on top of Levi's shoulder. Nothing. I just want to let you know that we might be watched. So it's best that we communicate telepathically from today onward until the assembly. Levi warned sternly. You failed to drop the suspicion on you. Ashcrow frowned as he swiftly disappeared, maintaining a telepathic conversation. Then, a few moments later, he reappeared and told him that no one was watching them. How did you know? Levi raised an eyebrow in surprise. I have my ways. Now speak. What happened? I was interrogated by Sir Feng Ling. Lying to him is nearly impossible without showing any sign. I tried my best to avoid getting implicated in the massacre, but my connection with you, not so much. Useless. Levi's eyebrows twitched. You were the one putting us in this situation. You just had to show off and let the others see you. If you got rid of the spiders and the goatee nightcrawler while staying in the shadows, no one will suspect me of anything. Indeed, the smartest thing to do would have been to act from the shadows, which wouldn't have put Levi in the situation to lie. But Ashcrow just had to show off his powers to him. Don't be naive. Ashcrow clarified calmly. You thought I made an appearance just to show off? It was to protect us. Protect us? Levi frowned. Are you trying to gaslight me? When have I ever lied to you? That's what I thought. Ashcrow carried on, taking Levi's speechlessness for agreement. If I haven't shown myself, your stomach wound will have no explanation except you becoming a sleepwalker or a daywalker. A hole was blown in your guts. You think civilians can survive it? No. Levi recognized that Ashcrow was making a ton of sense. A hole was pierced through him. This was enough to kill any civilian in less than 10 seconds at most. One could argue that the solar dome and recovery totems might have delayed his death, but no one would believe he came out of it without a single scratch. While they might suspect you of having a relation to me, they won't have much proof to make a move. In the worst possible scenario, all you should do is tell them that I have forced you to not snitch on me. True. Levi nodded in understanding. Levi knew that from other people's perspectives, he was a helpless, blind kid who survived the harrowing forest massacre purely through a miracle. In other words, their first assumption would never lead to him signing a contract with Ashcrow, a Tier 7+ monster. Especially when those monsters were kings and queens of nests, massive enough that they were called kingdoms and empires on Earth. Who would believe a terror of such caliber would dare sign a Daywalker contract with a blind kid and reverse all the hard work and pain he went through to reach such a stage? Even if Levi were to tell people of it, they would laugh in his face. It was counterintuitive since Nightcrawlers signed such contracts with humans for the sake of evolving to upper tiers, 7, 8, 9. That's why most Nightcrawlers taking this path were Tier 4 or Tier 3, since it required their previous evolution to reverse until the Shadow Life tree returned to a seed. Levi and Ashcrow's situation was simply too unique. No one would dare believe them unless they saw the awakening personally. Thus, Ashcrow was right in a sense. His appearance pulled some attention on Levi from Sir Feng Ling, but it was enough to give him a legit excuse for his stomach hole. I guess I was wrong. Levi owned up to his lack of foresight without being embarrassed. He was taught by his mother that the staircase of knowledge was climbed 2 steps forward and 1 step behind to ensure that nothing was lost. Good, now let's see if I am right again. Ashcrow shared solemnly. Go sit in the living room and wait for the holy pillar's light to descend. It's time to learn about your origins. Taking a deep breath, Levi stood up from the balcony and walked towards the living room, guiding himself with a hand on the wall. After reaching the center, he sat on the cold floor and removed his upper shirt, exposing his well-toned muscles. Astor, what time is it? Levi asked. It's 6:26, sir. Thank you, Levi murmured. The sun should be setting any moment now. As he waited, Levi couldn't help but wonder about the watering process for his seeds, and if it was any different than what he read about. He had already memorized the entire Daywalker cultivation system, making him understand that each shadow life seed required from the host a constant supply of sunlight to grow until the body hit a plateau. The plateau was always reached once the seeds fulfilled 15% of their needed resources from a total of 100%. The 15% was further split into 3 mini checkpoints, each at 5%. Using this information, the Daywalker's cultivation system was born as the humans separated each plateau into a named rank, like Pathfinder Daywalker, Warden Daywalker, Solarbound Daywalker, etc. Since each 15% was split into 3 mini checkpoints, they were named as the first stage, the second stage, and the third stage. For example, a rookie Daywalker at the third stage implied that he was at 15% completion, while a Warden Daywalker at the third stage entailed a 60% completion. Each 5% fulfilled, the Shadow Life seed rewarded its host with unlocking a random innate ability that the Nightcrawler had mastered before his evolution was reversed, or a unique power-up. It was like the Shadow Life seed stored all the data of the previous evolution and used it as a reward system to keep motivating and strengthening its hosts. This was the quickest and easiest way to obtain prepared abilities. In reality, the Nightcrawlers had to work their asses off to create those abilities from scratch. The Daywalkers also needed to do the same to create the so-called learned techniques based on the evolutionary traits of their partners. Combining those innate abilities and learned techniques gave birth to the so-called battle arts, since each Daywalker could create their unique fighting style separated from the crowd. Even if another Daywalker shared the same Nightcrawler species and powers, both would have different fighting styles. For example, Shia created a new technique called the Blood Ring of Damnation that was reliant on her crescent-bladed glaive. Another Daywalker with the same Nightcrawler might be using a spear, a bow, or even a gun. This allowed him to create blood battle bow arts, spear arts, or gun arts. But he wouldn't be able to replicate her technique unless he possessed a similar weapon. In the case of Levi, he had 3 seeds, 3 evolutionary paths, 3 different skill trees, and 9 weapon variations at his peak. Yet, Levi didn't seem overwhelmed at all. He was blind since childhood, which taught him the great skill of locking his focus on one issue at a time and drowning out the rest of the noise. When one had his visionary simulation taken away, his mind was bound to be sharpened into focusing on specific tasks at a time. At this moment, Levi's focus switched immediately from wondering about his peculiar cultivation system to his origins the moment he felt the warm embrace of the Holy Pillar's light. "It's here," Levi murmured as he lifted his head, bathing half-nude under the shower of gentle divine light falling from the heavens. Fortunately, their apartment was on the topmost floor, allowing them direct access to the holy light due to the glass roof, unlike the rest of the apartments under them. After all, no way would anyone dare live in a full-glass building internally and externally. The divine light filled every nook and corner of Larson's apartment bit by bit. It was like a living creature, moving with a will of its own to light up all the dark corners, even if it wasn't on its path. This was happening across the entire Tamara settlement and Holy Heliodor's region. Just like a guardian totem was placed on the region, not a single Nightcrawler would dare step inside the light unless it wanted to turn into ashes. Only sleepwalkers, daywalkers, or Nightcrawlers chained by the divine light could survive being inside the holy regions. "Try to harness the divine light into the sun's seed," Ash Krell said calmly. "Huh, you think I am?" Levi was left stunned. It finally dawned on him that Ash Krell believed his origins to be part of the race behind the Holy Pillars, Solar Aegis Sanctuary, and Solar Totems. That's because neither Daywalkers nor Sleepwalkers could absorb the divine light from the pillars, even though it was considered a higher form of purified sunlight. "Stop blubbering and do it," Ash Krell scolded. Levi swiftly took control of his emotions and locked in, knowing it was foolish to keep asking Ash Krell when he could find the answer on his own. He silenced all the noise in his mind and concentrated his spiritual vision on the 3 otherworldly seeds, which were orbiting each other nonstop. He ignored the crimson seed and the void seed, pinpointing his whole attention on the sun seed until it appeared zoomed in his line of sight. Seeing the fiery waves and solar flares left Levi fascinated, as he felt like he was staring at an actual minimized sun. After appreciating its glory for a moment, he started envisioning the divine light penetrating his pores and guiding it straight to the sun seed. This was the known manual method daywalkers used to feed the sunlight to the shadow life seed, besides using their eyes. The best and most talented daywalkers utilize both methods to accelerate the seed's growth, as they were known to sit in broad daylight and stare directly into the sunlight. The eyes were believed to be connected to the seed, which meant that as long as one stared directly into the source of light, the sunlight would be absorbed straight away by the seed. This was referred to as automatic cultivation, since daywalkers didn't need to do anything besides dealing with the damage done to the retinas. The results varied from one to another, depending on how sensitive their eyes were to light. Since Levi had no eyes, this entire process was scrapped, which was more than enough reason to kill anyone's hopes of becoming a daywalker. But Levi never gave up and had always trained in secret, trained the hated and tedious manual cultivation process, which required the utilization of one's pores. He sat cross-legged on the balcony under the sun each day for 3 hours, doing nothing but training his visualization process. He was laughed at by the night crawlers every single day, mocking him for trying so hard on a dead end, ridiculing his foolish attempts to visually guide the sunlight to his empty abdomen, which had no shadow life seed and probably never will. Yet, Levi always tuned out their voices and kept his head lowered, working his ass off for this very day, trusting that a time would come when he would have his own seed. The day had finally arrived, and all of Levi's painstaking hard work had paid off. Under Ashkral's surprised and delighted expression, the divine holy light surrounding Levi started piercing his pores and swimming through his bloodstream from top to bottom, heading straight in one direction: his abdomen. As the divine light gathered in his abdomen, following Levi's visualization like he was a snake charmer, a divine symbol of a burning sun manifested at the center of his stomach. Then, each tongue started moving in different directions, painting golden inked lines across Levi's limbs and face. The moment the divine line reached Levi's forehead, the same mark of the sun was inked in the center, creating a connected circle between his seed and mind. The light produced was so intense, it crept into Arthur's room from the bottom of the door. Let the divine light perish? Is it perish you or high? Arthur's eyes, which were buried under tens of holographic screens, immediately darted in the direction of the light. Without an ounce of hesitation, Arthur bounced out of his bed like fire was set on his ass and swiftly rushed outside, thinking that a blaze was started or something. However, when he opened the door and saw the sight of his brother levitating an inch above the ground while shimmering akin to a divine deity, he froze in his place. "Brother?" he murmured in a daze, having no idea how to react. He didn't know what was happening, but seeing his brother's peaceful expression and regular breathing, he figured that he might have it under control. Thus, he made the decision not to interrupt whatever was happening. He crouched next to the fridge and stared at the divine tattoos on his brother's skin with a fascinated look. So cool. Meanwhile, Levi had no clue what was happening outside. His entire attention was concentrated on guiding the divine, purified sunlight into the sun seed. But no matter how hard he tried, the energy never reached the sun seed. The instant it entered the 3 seeds spherical domain, it disappeared instantly. What's going on? Is my visualization hindered since I never trained this part? Levi frowned. While he had trained for years on how to visualize the sunlight into his abdomen, since he never had a seed in it, his training was limited to that part. He assumed that it wouldn't be much of an issue, thinking that the moment the sunlight got close to the seed, it would devour it instantly. But it looked like his assumption was wrong, and he had to spoon-feed the seeds directly like they were a bunch of toddlers. Unfortunately, just as Levi planned on thinking of other ways to do so, he felt lightheaded like he had suffered from heat stroke. This collapsed his concentration and ruined the visualization, causing the divine light to swiftly detach from Levi. The golden inked tattoo and sun symbols disappeared next, returning the living room to its usual dimming. Levi landed on the ground with a faint thud and fell on his back. His skin was red, and smoke was emitting from his pores like he had been in a sauna for hours. As his spiritual vision returned to the darkness around him, Ashkral's funny face appeared in front. He had the widest grin possible. Before he could ask Ashkral what happened, Arthur's concerned voice resounded in his ears. "Big bro, what was that? Are you okay?" "I'm okay, just lightheaded," Levi replied while taking short, rapid breaths, feeling like he was cooked in an oven. Arthur went on and helped him get up, but the moment he touched him, his eyes widened at how hot his body was. "You're burning up? Are you sure you are good?" "Yes, don't worry." As he was guiding him to the couch, Levi requested that he give him an hour or two to wrap things up here. Then, he would come and explain everything to him. Arthur didn't retort or complain. He nodded in understanding and went to the kitchen, pouring a cup of water for his brother. Then he placed it in front of him and went back to his room. "Call me if you need anything," Arthur shouted from behind the door. "I..." Levi took a sip of the water to ease his dizziness. After catching his breath, he looked at Ashkral and said one word. "Explain." "What's there to explain?" "Congratulations. You are half Radian, half human." Ashkral chuckled. Half Radian, although Levi knew that no other reason could explain what he had just done to the Holy Pillar light. He still felt surreal. Half Radian? As in the upper dimensional Radian race, responsible for the survival of the entire human species? The ones worshipped by a great portion of citizens and daywalkers, believing them to be their sole saviors? He couldn't believe it. Unlike the Nightcrawlers, the Radians rarely stepped foot on Earth, as their entire support was through the solar Aegis sanctuaries across the globe. Thus, it was nearly impossible to see or meet one unless they were at the peak of authority within each holy region. To find out that one of his parents might be a Radian was no easy pill to swallow, as it changes entire identity and destiny. But it can't be. Both my parents looked and acted just like any other human. Levi knitted his eyebrows. They didn't even possess a good potential to become a daywalker. Maybe their memories were erased, and their strength was lost in translation. Maybe your parents were also just a descendant of the true Radiant, and their human bloodline ruled over their genetic formation, making them average. Ashkral said calmly, "Who knows? You might be a descendant of an ancient Radiant who descended on Earth way before the first fall of civilization. Only now did one of his descendants inherit his qualities. When it came to bloodlines, for the most part, the genes would thin out as the bloodline gets mixed with average ones over time. But this didn't eliminate the miraculous emergence of the radiant dominant genes down the line. This might be what happened to you or your brother. You saw his freakish physical genetics. That's not normal." Levi nodded in understanding. Once his parents were eliminated as suspects of being a Radiant undercover, it opened a whole can of questions, but also answers. "I believe it might be my grandparents on my mother's side. I don't know which one, as I was told that they perished during the 3rd decade after the fall of civilization." Levi shared, "My mother always spoke highly of them and told me that they were one of the wisest people in the world." "They might." Ashkral shrugged. "Being wise isn't enough of a proof, but it does entail an extended longevity. Radiant race's longevity is nowhere near humans' perception." Just as Levi wanted to comment back, Ashkral dropped the subject. "Whether it's them or it's one of your parents, it doesn't matter right now." He grinned. "What matters is that you have succeeded in absorbing the divine light, which means I don't need eyes to keep up with the other daywalkers." Levi murmured, "Keep up." Ashkral laughed. "Boy, do you know the difference between normal sunlight and purified sunlight?" "Yes, I read that it's 10 times more potent." Levi nodded. "Well, the divine light is 100 times more, and you, my boy, are the only daywalker in the world with access to it." Ashkral dropped a bombshell, leaving Levi with his lips parted in shock. All Levi ever wanted was to absorb sunlight like normal daywalkers to keep up with their growth. He had never dreamed of absorbing purified sunlight consistently, as he knew that growth totems were too pricey and unavailable for daywalkers with no network. Now, he was hearing that he had infinite access to the divine light, keeping their civilization alive, an energy source 100 times more potent than natural sunlight. He ought to feel awestruck. Though it looks like you haven't inherited the Radiant's heat immunity. Ashkral added, you need to train to absorb it properly to reduce the lightheadedness produced from heat stroke. Heat stroke? My temperature did rise immensely, Levi said while touching his hot skin. Radians are upper-dimensional entities in tune with stars. You might have inherited their ability to absorb their divine light, but is not as great without heat immunity. Does this mean I will be suffering from heat strokes or even drop dead if I absorb too much divine light at a time? Levi asked. Unfortunately, yes. Ashkral nodded. I see. Levi smiled faintly, not voicing a single complaint. In his eyes, it might not be as optimal as absorbing divine light like the rest of the Radiants, but it was 1,000,000 times better than what he had before. At least now, he had a legitimate chance at feeding his seeds with a quality energy source. Don't sell yourself too short. Ashkral shared. You might suffer from heat strokes each time you absorb the divine light, but just like anything, your resistance can be improved. How? Is it through hard work or maybe changing the environment to a cooler one? Levi believed that practicing the absorption process through repetition would increase his resistance to heat over time. When combined with training in cold environments, this would definitely prolong his absorption process. Those two are standardized improvement methods that are a must, but they won't be your main method for enhancing your resistance. Ashkral pointed his tiny wing at Levi's abdomen and said calmly, you already have the missing key to negate all the shortcomings of being a mere half-radian. The Sun Origin Seed. Levi figured it out instantly. Yes. Ashkral nodded. As long as you feed it consistently, the seed will reward you with unimaginable powers related to stars. Heat immunity is one of these powers. That sounds good and all, but I tried it and failed for some reason. Fail? Yes. I followed the exact steps of manual cultivation that I have been practicing my whole life. Yet, the energy disappeared the instant it entered the 3 seeds orbital zone. I am sure the Sun Seed hasn't absorbed it since it showed no reactee. While Levi was explaining the situation earnestly, Ashkral was chuckling in front of his face. What's so funny? Levi frowned. Check the 9 senses seed and you will understand. Hearing this, Levi swiftly used his spiritual vision to gaze at the 3 origin seeds. When his eyes landed on the crimson seed, he couldn't help but gasp in astonishment. There is a tiny crack. Levi knew this was massive, as it implied that his 9 senses seed had fed on the divine light and had started the sprouting process. How? I didn't even guide the light to it. My fault. I forgot to tell you that my seed is a gluttonous prick who sucks any source of energy in its vicinity instantly. Ashkral chuckled. I didn't expect you to succeed in your first attempt at absorbing the divine light. Levi was left speechless. He was already struggling to understand how he was going to deal with the 3-body problem concerning balancing feeding each seed, not to throw a tantrum. Now, he was being told that one of the origin seeds was a selfish F***CK who wouldn't hesitate to eat what he threw at the others. Since it could absorb any source of energy in the universe, the other 2 origin seeds had no fighting chance at keeping up unless Levi made some changes. No wonder you came out like this. Levi sighed helplessly. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Now, can you please tell me what the hell is your seed, and how can I tame it to avoid angering the other 2? Taming my seed? Ashkral shook his head. If only it were that simple, I wouldn't have had multiple dead partners. Are you implying I am forced to feed your seed first until I hit its plateau? Then I can share the rest of the energy with the other 2? Levi's eyebrows rose in stupor. He understood that if he couldn't stop the 9 senses seed from leeching on all sources of energy, the only thing that would stop it was the plateau at the end of the 3rd stage. In simpler terms, he had to help it reach 15% before he could consider feeding the other 2 seeds. While this wouldn't cause many problems at the beginning of his evolutionary journey, it would become a massive hurdle later on when the roots and branches would start to spread out. You catch on quick. Hearing Ashkral's approval left Levi silent for a couple of seconds. He could already envision the agony he would go through when the roots and branches of other seeds started fighting for space following the nine senses seed. Don't focus too much on the future. We will start thinking of ways to deal with the three-body problem after you reach the first plateau of all three origin seeds. Ashkral said calmly, "Before the sprouting of seeds, you don't have to worry." I see. Levi sighed in relief. Although this wasn't the most optimal situation, at least he could behave and grow as a normal daywalker at the lower ranks. May I know now what kind of powers you possess and what I can expect to unlock at each stage? Levi asked again. He had already analyzed the nine senses' seed powers. The only thing he came up with was that it had relations to their senses. However, the fact that it was called the nine senses seed threw him off, as he only knew of the existence of six senses: sight, vision, hearing, audition, smell, olfaction, taste, gustation, touch, tactition, and lastly, spirit sense, spiritual perception. I command the nine senses and anything related to them. Ashkral shared calmly. There are 5 common senses and 4 unique senses. You're already somewhat trained in spiritual perception, which is one of the 4 unique senses. What about the other 3? Levi asked eagerly. You won't be interacting with them at such a low level, so there is no point in wasting my spit. You really will do me like this? Boy, each sense is a world of its own, and if you manage to master a single one and all of its related powers, you should feel blessed. Ashkral said, It's that difficult? Levi raised an eyebrow in surprise. In Levi's mind, he could envision each sense and some of its related powers, but he could not imagine them being so difficult that he would fail to master them. Let me put it this way. Ashkral smirked. Out of dozens of partners I trained with, only one managed to master 50% of a single common sense. 50%, that's it. Levi was left agape. The fact that Ashkral had tens of partners and all of them were extremely talented and filled with potential made this achievement even harder to fathom. This fixed his perspective about the nine senses seed and made him understand that he truly had no reason to learn about the other unique senses when he would most definitely be struggling to master the 5 common ones. If she didn't die due to the failure at solving the 3-body problem, she might have gone all the way and mastered 100%. Ashkral sighed while pointing a wing to the heavens. Rest in peace, Attica. You were a good girl. Levi's eyebrows twitched, imagining Ashkral wishing him to rest in peace after he replaced him with a new victim. But swiftly, he removed such thoughts from his mind and knitted his eyebrows solemnly. The more difficult it is, the stronger I will get. To deal with the dusk-bound order, I will need all the strength in the world. Levi understood that he was nowhere near the dusk-bound order's league, as not even the strongest known daywalkers in the world dared to touch them. One could say they were at the level of solar aegis sanctuaries across the globe and were treated with respect by all nightcrawlers. Tell me more about those common senses powers. Levi inquired. I will teach you once you reach 5% and unlock your first weapon and innate ability. Only then will I have something to work with. Ashkral said, For now, let's move on to the Void Origin Seed and see if he will show promising results. Levi nodded in understanding and listened to Ashkral's explanation about what he needed to do to sense the dark energy surrounding him and absorb it. While the process in itself was somewhat similar to what he had trained before, the circumstances weren't. Levi soon realized that regardless of how much he focused or tried to sense the dark energy infesting the spiritual bridge of darkness, his mind came out blank. It was like he was trying to capture something in absolute nothingness. Feel it. It's right there. It's everywhere. I'm trying, but I'm not sensing anything. If I can't sense it, how can I visualize guiding it to the seed? As expected, it looks like you will need more practice. Ashkral said, All right, you can stop now. Levi let out a long exhale in disappointment, not too pleased with himself. Brat, dark energy is one of the hardest sources to tap into, and if you pulled it off in your first attempt, I would have kowtowed before you. Ashkral chuckled. He wasn't discouraged by Levi's inability to sense the dark energy, as he knew that it was extremely challenging and required either years of hard work or impeccable attunement to dark energy. While Levi's attunement should be much higher than humans, it was still not enough to claim him as a prodigy and allow him to sense the energy on the first try. Today was a great success despite this. Now, we have the feeding order for the seeds. Ashkral noted, you will start with the 9 senses seed, and after you hit the first plateau, you will move on to the sun seed. Simultaneously, you will keep attempting to get a feel for the dark energy and absorb it. Only when you hit all 3 plateaus will you try to break through each one by helping me evolve to Tier 2. Ashkral concluded, understood. Yes. Good. Is there anything else you want to learn? Many, but for now, I just want to know one thing. Levi knitted his eyebrows. You said before that the dusk-bound order might have been after me all along, and not my parents, due to my radiant bloodline. May I know what you meant by that? Levi knew if the dusk-bound order was found to have been targeting him from the start and not his parents, it would change everything. The implications would go beyond a paid assassination. Levi always believed that his parents had been ordered to hit on them by business competitors due to his father's invention. He was the founder and inventor of the first nightwear stripes technology. He was approached by many lineager families, agencies, and business companies to purchase his technology. However, his father refused to sell it, as he desired to create his own company and build it into a business empire transcending the Holy Region's borders. After rejecting everyone, his father sought out a partnership with a lineager family in Tamar settlement. A partnership that would ensure a consistent flow of liquidity and support from a major family. All for the price of 49% shares of the budding company. That's the business endeavor for which his father came to Tamar's settlement. As one could anticipate, Levi's parents were assassinated on the night before the signing deal, turning their children's lives upside down. After this merciless assassination, the investigation squad did everything in its power to find out who hired the dusk-bound order assassins. Even the lineage families weren't spared. Unfortunately, not a single lead was found, and all the primary suspects were dropped. The worst part? The nightwear stripes technology was leaked, and all business companies profited immensely from creating their replicas. This erased Levi's father's legacy as the original inventor, since every company put up a figurehead designer to dodge accusations of theft. Since all of this happened a decade ago, the news died out, and people moved on with their lives, not caring about who invented this or that. All they cared about was to use the stripes to illuminate their surroundings, nothing more, nothing less. This left only a few people who still knew the true name of the inventor, Brian Larson. That's a question for you to find out. Ashkral answered casually. All I can say is that your eyes might be more special than you think. My eyes? Special? You don't think that your spiritual vision is so great because you've been blind for a long time, right? If only life worked that way. Ashkral chuckled. While being blind has helped you train your spiritual vision tremendously, a base was still needed. I believe that even after your eyes were stolen, your spiritual vision remained intact and grew stronger since it's tied up to your soul. I see. Levi frowned. Although Ashkral hadn't told him much about what made his eyes special, Levi was already convinced that something wasn't right. Otherwise, he wouldn't be blind for a decade now without any signs of vision restoration. As mentioned before, the doctors had already tried all possible methods to restore his vision, but to no avail. The money spent on those operations, recovery totems, and such had devoured most of the trust money left behind by his late parents. Those failures always eluded the doctors and government until they could do nothing but give up on Levi and place an ankle monitor to keep a watch on him in case of the worst possibility. Whether your eyes were special or not, they aren't in your possession at the moment, Ashkral said indifferently. Thinking about them won't bring them back. If you want them, you have to snatch them from the dusk-bound order personally. Is that something you want to do? It's nothing but another reason to fuel my vengeance for what they have done to me and my family. Levi nodded coldly. It's clear this is no longer an issue of simple assassination. It goes deeper, and I'm going to dig through this rabbit hole until I touch the bottom. After everything that was discussed, Levi recognized that a path of hardship awaited him, as his cultivation system might be complex, dangerous, and lead him on a suicidal path. But if he managed to succeed, if he managed to pull it off despite having a 1% chance, his life would never be the same. His world of darkness would collapse like how Ashkrau showed him in the forest, and his strength would finally be enough to get him his vengeance and the answers he always wanted. Why were his parents murdered? Were they the target or him? Who ordered the hit? Why were his eyes sought after? What about his true identity concerning his peculiar radiant bloodline? Many mysteries were waiting to be solved, and Levi already had his back against the wall, forcing him on a path of no return. What are you going to do now? Ashkrau asked with a faint smirk. I'm already cooled up. Levi poured what remained of the cup on top of his head, causing faint steam to arise akin to cooling a sound of stone. Then he went to sit in the same spot and said icily, I won't leave the apartment until I reach 5%. That's what I like to hear. A few hours later, Levi was seen sitting on top of a wet puddle of his own sweat. He was breathing roughly while his skin was crimson red and emitting a pillar of smoke. This was his 6th session of absorbing the divine light, and it was clear he was close to burning himself out. Still, Levi forced himself to stand, wincing from a pounding headache. Clutching his head, he staggered to the fridge and opened it after fumbling with the handle a few times. After getting assaulted by its cold breeze, he leaned against the door and remained in that position for a couple of minutes, his wet, disheveled hair hiding his pained grimace. At the moment, he wished nothing but to shove himself inside the fridge. You should stop here. Ashkrau warned, I know you want to get stronger fast, but consistency is 100 times more efficient than speed. I know. That's why I'm not going to stop until I drop on the ground. Levi uttered indifferently, I have to test my limits and reach failure. Only then can I create a consistent and efficient pace. I see you're treating this like working out in the gym. Ashkrau chuckled. Whether it's cultivation or a normal workout, the human body can never tap into its ultimate potential if one always stops at the first sign of discomfort, Levi said. You are right, but also don't forget. Ashkrau doubled down. There is a fine line between death and touching one's true limitation. Levi remained silent, knowing that Ashkrau was right. The human body knew what it was doing by using pain as a way to deter its owner from going beyond its capabilities. If he kept ignoring it and forcing his body to experience such a high temperature over and over again, he might either pass out or drop dead right there. Although Levi knew this, he had no plans on stopping now, feeling like he could add at least 2 more sessions. Thus, after a 15-minute break to cool himself using a cold shower, Levi went back to the same place and sat on top of the previous sweat puddle, not bothering to clear it. While it seemed disgusting to others, Levi used his sweat puddle as a cooling station. After a total of 6 sessions, each one spanning between 15 and 30 seconds, the 9 senses seed now has 10 tiny cracks. This means I have completed 1%. Levi murmured to himself as he gazed at the pulsing crimson seed. The percentage readings weren't being reported by the seed or written on its body as numbers. The night crawlers had taught the humans how to read the clues across the seed's growth until it reached fruition. The humans came along and simplified the system by adding percentages, since it was much easier than asking someone how many cracks or tree rings they had to check their progress. In the case of seeds, each 10 cracks implied a progress of 1%. This reading system would carry on until the sprouting stage, which occurred after the first plateau breakthrough. This means if the energy requirement remained the same, and I was doing 6 sessions a day, I would reach 5% in about. Levi did the math in his mind in a second or two, and then mumbled 30 sessions in 5 days. Levi felt that he could narrow this result immensely to 3 days if he stayed up all night, doing nothing but cultivating, cooling down, and repeating the process again. He understood that if he was going this slow with divine light, then absorbing the natural daylight with his pores would do nothing but scratch the 9 senses seed gluttonous stomach. After all, He was told by Ashkral that it needed 10 times the energy requirement compared to the void and sun seeds. He wasn't an idiot. Although he wasn't told the difference between the energy requirements of the void and sun seeds compared to the shadow life seed, he understood that it would be just as significant. In simpler terms, the nine senses seed was an abomination when it came to energy consumption, and only high-quality resources could fulfill its insatiable hunger. Thus, Levi lowered his head and continued feeding the beast against the agonizing screams of his body. Unfortunately, the seventh session lasted for a mere 10 seconds before Levi's temperature rose to a new, dangerous level, leaving him gasping for air with a dried-up throat. He had drunk more than a liter of water in the past 15 minutes. Yet, in less than 10 seconds, he felt like he was lost for 3 days in a desert without a sip of water. It was a horrendous sensation that left him crawling to the kitchen. Although he was blind, he still felt dizzy and disoriented like everyone else, since it was related to the inner ear vestibular system, which controlled balance rather than vision alone. After climbing to the counter, Levi turned on the faucet and placed his head underneath the water. Steam exploded from his head, and the droplets falling down his chin turned hot almost instantly. This was at his limit. Ashkral knew it, Levi knew it, and if anyone else was watching, they would think the same. "Are you planning to stop now and get a prolonged rest?" Ashkral inquired. "You joking?" Levi uttered with a hoarse voice. "This is it. This is the place where the ordinary and the special are separated. If I stopped here, I would be no different than any average person. I have to break the limits. I have to at least try, regardless of the outcome." "Average person?" Ashkral smiled inwardly as he watched Levi staggering towards the bathroom. Does he even know that the average person would have stopped at the second session after the burning sensation started to feel as real as being burned under flames? Does he even know that he has long since broken the limit of the average people and was now seeking to break his own unrealistic limitation? Ashkral couldn't help but appreciate Levi's impeccable standards he held himself to. He could tell that Levi's concept of what was normal and special was flawed for birth. This didn't surprise him a bit, as he had watched him grow from a child to this youthful boy, burning with unfulfilled desires stolen from him that night. While normal people hung around each other from childhood, Levi spent his time mostly around night crawlers and his brother, who was also a genetic anomaly. The only average person in his childhood was his uncle, who took them in and raised them until they became teenagers and moved to Tamar settlement. He was even homeschooled, as no parent was going to accept having their children study next to a time bomb. How could he know what was average when the only thing guiding him was the stories he had read from books about the most powerful daywalkers? Levi felt that if he didn't take it this far, he had no place to be named next to them. Thus, after a 20-minute cooling period under a cold shower, he returned and kicked off one more session. As he focused his foggy spiritual vision on the divine light surrounding him, it responded to his call almost instantly. Unlike the first time ever, the divine light was absorbed naturally within Levi's body without creating any golden-inked tattoos or sun symbols. Anyone watching him would think he was meditating under the divine light. It was like he merely awakened his dormant bloodline to absorb the divine light for the first time. After that, there was no need for such a grandiose transformation. 1, 2, 3, 4. While it didn't look like he was absorbing the divine light, Levi was feeling the rising heat akin to being dropped into a giant pot of boiling water. But he kept regulating his breathing to fight off the dizziness while counting down each second. His spiritual vision never left the massive crimson pulsing seed, which appeared to be sucking off any particle of energy that entered the seed's field. As it kept eating the golden particles, tiny cracks started surfacing across its body. Levi zoned out completely on the cracks, not hearing even his thoughts. All that was on his mind was to keep adding the cracks, no matter what it took. 10 seconds, 12 seconds, 15 seconds. This left Ashkral astonished and a bit concerned, as he could feel the same burning heat and knew that it wasn't to be scoffed at all. While his pain tolerance had already reached a new freakish height, Levi wasn't the same. This made him feel that if Levi kept going at it forget breaking his limit. He was going to melt his organs off. Boy, cut it off. You have done more than enough for the day. More, more, more. Unfortunately, Levi was turned deaf to the entire world. He just kept repeating more in his mind while guiding the divine light into the seed like he was bewitched by it or the prospects of obtaining strength at last. It was like putting candy before a child for the first time after watching it on TV for more than a decade. Levi bit hard and refused to let go. 30 seconds, 40 seconds, 1 minute. You little shit, you will get yourself killed and ruin everything on day one. As Ashcrow watched the steaming hot blood seeping down Levi's nose, he knew that he had reached dangerous levels of heat, and he had to stop him. Otherwise, death was a guaranteed outcome. Without an ounce of hesitation, Ashcrow focused his spiritual vision on the three-body problem sphere and used his mental prowess to disturb the orbital path of the three seeds. The moment he did this, the sun seed made contact with the nine senses seed and sent an electrifying shockwave across Levi's entire body. Levi was jolted awake and immediately lost his concentration on guiding the divine light. This interrupted the process and pushed the divine light away at last. The moment the heat stopped rising, the adrenaline that was keeping Levi conscious went away with it. Thud! Levi didn't even understand what happened before he found himself passed out on the ground. Hearing the abnormal thud of Levi's fall, Arthur immediately stopped his studies and peeked outside of the room to check on his brother. Levi, you goo, Levi. When he saw him lying on the ground on top of a pool of sweat and blood while creating a tower of steam above, he swiftly dashed to him. Just as he wanted to flip him to the side, he yelped in pain after touching Levi's burning skin. What the hell is this? With an anxious expression, Arthur picked up Levi and took him to the bathroom, placing him inside the tub. Then, he turned the faucet on top of his head. Not done yet. He turned on the shower head too and started spraying Levi like he was caught in invisible fire. He had no idea what was going on, and the only thing on his mind at the moment was to cool his brother's temperature. Fortunately, his quick thinking saved the day as Levi's temperature started to decrease significantly. After a minute or so, Levi's scarlet skin returned to somewhat its natural color, and his nose stopped bleeding. Still, Arthur kept spraying him with cold water for a couple more minutes. Only then did he try to wake him up. Levi remained unresponsive, forcing Arthur to request assistance from Astra AI on what to do next. After describing the situation to her, Astra advised him to apply cold compresses, such as wet towels or ice packs wrapped in cloth to the neck, armpits, groin, and wrists. Arthur stopped the running water and followed Astra's instructions, knowing that it wasn't right to keep spraying water on someone who passed out. But it was an emergency, and he had to do it. After finishing with this, Arthur picked up Levi and wiped out the water with a towel. Then, he placed him on the bed and put a single cold towel on top of his forehead. Next, he brought his head near his nose and heart. When he found out that both were starting to get regulated, he finally signed in relief. "You prick, if you're going to kill yourself, at least tell me." Arthur cursed while glancing at his burning red palms. He still couldn't fathom how hot his brother was and how he managed to survive it. Just one touch was enough to burn some of his palm skin off. Only Ashcrow seemed to know. He might not have inherited the Radiant's heat immunity, but it looks like he did inherit a high resistance to heat compared to the average human. It just needed an awakening. He thought. He understood that no normal human would survive what Levi had gone through, as his temperature had crossed way past 43 degrees C, 109 degrees Fahrenheit, which was the known temperature for organs shutting down. Ashcrow figured out that when Levi started hitting those crazy numbers, his dormant radiant genetics related to heat resistance were forcefully awakened by one of the three seeds to save him. When it came to the survival of the host, the seed would do anything and everything to help it survive. Sometime later, at the brink of dawn, Levi woke up with one of the nastiest headaches of his life. When he touched his head, the cold towel dropped on his chest, confusing him for a moment. What happened? He asked while looking around him, trying to find Ashcrow in the darkness. Ashcrow popped out of nowhere and scolded him immediately. "You almost got yourself killed, idiot!" When he heard this, Levi knit his eyebrows and tried his best to recall what happened through the pain of the headache. Unfortunately, he found out that his memories were limited to the start of the 7th cultivation session. After that, everything went blank. Seeing his reaction, Ash Crowell went on and narrated what happened and how close he was to an uneventful death if it wasn't for his brother saving his ass. After hearing everything, Levi felt a chill course down his spine as he truly couldn't remember any of that. Suddenly, Arthur's sleepy voice resounded in his ears. "Big bro, you are finally up." Levi turned to face his brother after picking up on his nearby location from his voice. Arthur was indeed sitting on a chair next to Levi's bed, as he had never left after putting him to sleep. "Arthie, thank you for everything, and I am sorry for such a screw-up." Levi sighed, ashamed. While he didn't know what happened at the 7th session to make him lose his marbles like that, he understood that he shouldn't have taken such a risk in the first place while being alone. He knew that seeking to break the limit was too dangerous for his body, but he believed that he had it under control like the previous sessions. Such overconfidence almost brought him to an early downfall. "I don't care what you did. I just want to know what it is so I can be prepared next time," Arthur said solemnly. "Be honest. Did you sign a contract with Ash Crowell? I heard about our Savior's description from Shia and the others. I know it's him." While Arthur wasn't one of the brightest minds out there, his instincts were pretty sharp. "Yes," Levi nodded, having no interest in hiding the truth from his brother. "Is it what you have wished for?" Arthur asked. His tone carried a hint of concern. Unlike the others, who had no idea about what was going on with Ash Crowell, Arthur understood that his brother had been targeted by him for a very long time. The fact that Levi's massive hole was healed miraculously had been eating a big portion of his mind, wondering, fearing that his brother might have signed a sleepwalker contract to save them. "It might not be what I have wished for, but I am in control, and that's what matters." Levi smiled as he summoned the nocturnal contract, showing his brother what kind of terms he signed. Although he knew that his brother trusted him 100%, he still needed to show him the contract to ease his worries. After all, sleepwalkers were able to steal entire identities, mannerisms, behavior, speech, and everything about their partner after absorbing their memories. That's what made them so scary, as no one could figure out if they were dealing with a daywalker or a well-trained sleepwalker. After Arthur browsed through the entire contract, his eyes widened in disbelief. "You signed this." "I had to." "Why?" "It was the only way for us to live." "I see." Arthur lowered his head and kept his mouth shut. His hands were clutched into tight fists. Although the contract was quite decent with only 2 bad terms, which were no death insurance and no fixed period, Arthur hated this for his brother. But all he could do was accept it in silence, knowing that if Levi hadn't signed it, he would be dead by now. Picking up on his brother's heavy heartbeats, Levi smiled serenely. "It's all right. The contract has given me more than I have ever wished for." "What about your peculiar transformation?" Arthur asked. "You were inked up from top to bottom with golden lines, and you had sun symbols in your stomach and forehead. The symbols resembled the solar aegis sanctuary insignia immensely." Levi wasn't caught off guard by the description. Ash Crowell had already explained his transformation during the 2nd session. Unlike Arthur, who found it cool, Levi was just relieved he didn't have to transform every time he cultivated. That would be a giant pain in the ass and would always force him to be careful every time he tapped on the divine light. "You can say so." Levi smiled. "Damn, I wish my future contracted Nightcrawler can give me a similar cool transformation." Arthur eased a bit, showing an envious look. "Then you better eat those books so you won't fail the intelligence trial and attract the strongest Nightcrawlers to sign a contract with." Levi shooed him away with a hand. Go. You only have 2 months, and it's nowhere near enough to cram everything." "Thanks to Shia and Jojo, I have enough SR pills to last me until the day of the assembly," Arthur said with a resolved tone. "I will show those F***ers that I have the brains and the muscles." Levi chuckled as he listened to his brother's thundering steps while heading to his room. Just as he was about to close the door, Levi remembered something crucial. "Arthur, don't tell anyone I became a daywalker. Not until after the assembly." "I got you." Arthur shouted from inside the room, even if he didn't understand the reason. Are you sure about keeping the truth from your brother? Ashcrowl snickered. I thought you brothers had no secrets between you. This is for the best, at least now. Levi replied calmly. He decided to keep the truth about their bloodline to himself for now, knowing that it would do nothing but confuse his brother. He was already struggling with his books. There was no point in filling his brain with ideas that would change his entire perspective about their identity and family. At least, not before the contract ritual assembly. If Arthur were to become a daywalker, Levi would check if he could also absorb the divine light. As for his three-body problem and the inevitable death awaiting him if he couldn't solve it, he was going to take this to the grave with him. While Levi was cultivating under natural sunlight for the first time on his balcony, finally enjoying a relaxed session after a series of grueling ones, Shia was on a train to the capital. Her goals were clear: secure his recommendation letter and gather the materials needed for Bleeder's upcoming evolution. The distance between Tamara's settlement and Heliodor's capital was no less than 15 kilometers. So, she would arrive in about 10 minutes max. Jamal and Sergio were accompanying her since their agency's headquarters were in the capital. They should have left after their interrogation, since they were ordered by their senior captain to report back concerning the harrowing forest massacre. But they held it off until Levi woke up to check on him. Will you request a recommendation letter from Lord Idris or Madame Ema? Jamal asked curiously as he gazed at Shia, who was playing holographic chess against Sergio. Both options are sh*t, but I would rather eat dirt than request anything from that old geezer. Shia gave him a dirty glare for even bringing up such a suggestion. Come on, Shia. Are you really going to remain hung up on the past? Jamal sighed. His protection totem has saved our asses. Isn't that enough to drop your grudge? Neva. Shia growled at him with a lollipop in her mouth. Shia, you know it's just hair, right? Even Sergio rolled his eyes at her ferocious animosity toward her father, especially when her grudge didn't warrant such a reaction in their minds. It's just hair. Shia narrowed her eyes coldly at Sergio until he felt a chill creeping down his spine. Still, he stood his ground. Yes, it's just hair. He doubled down solemnly. Shia, you have been blessed to be born in one of the most prominent families in the region. Your father might be stern and rough, but all of his actions are done for the sake of his family and agency protection. That's why we respect him so much as our leader and would do anything he asks us to. So what if he cut your hair and forced you to keep it low? Is that too much of a price to carry the Morningstar surname? Jamal murmured from the side. If it were me, I wouldn't have hesitated to go bald if it meant getting the Morningstar surname. Listening to their words, Shia quietly licked her lollipop, saying nothing. Her eyes stayed on the holographic 3D chessboard, though her mind churned with a mess of thoughts and emotions. She lifted the queen piece and played with it in her hand. Then, she let out a long exhale and placed it in the best strategic position on the board, stunning Sergio. Checkmate. Then, she turned her head toward the giant glass window, eyes fixed on the cattle grazing in the fields. She didn't respond or argue. There was no point. They were looking at the situation through their own lens, not hers. To outsiders, or those less fortunate, she had no right to complain or rebel against her father. After all, there were other people whose lives were currently in the gutter, struggling to just sleep daily and suffering from Nightcrawler's invasions each night. She knew all of this and never took away from the pain of others. But this didn't mean that her problems meant nothing. This didn't mean that just because other people were suffering, she must never utter a single complaint in her life. As her eyes focused on the glass, and she saw her reflection in her short crimson hair, she couldn't help but smile bitterly. It was never about the hair, and she knew her friends would never truly understand. Not unless they had lived her life. To them, her family was royalty, something to admire or envy. They couldn't see the weight behind the image. How could one ever understand the troubles and woes of another soul that he envied? Cough. Well, whether it's Madame Nima or Lord Idris, it will be an upheaval battle to secure the recommendation letter without telling them about your deal. Jamal swiftly returned to the original subject, not wanting to spoil the mood any longer. True, While I give utmost props to Levi's intelligence and powerful spiritual vision, if your mother were to hear that he is blind, she would reject you instantly. Sergio nodded. Shia knew that her friends were right. The recommendation letters were given to all the high-ranked agencies to recommend potential children with no background or ones with outsider identities, such as belonging to other holy regions or survivors from Nightcrawler's nests. If this were all, the recommendation letters wouldn't carry much weight for those agencies. Their true power was the priority recruitment that came with it. In other words, the agencies recommending any rising talents would have dibs on them during the contract ritual assembly if they were to become daywalkers. This led the agencies to value their limited recommendation letters even more, reserving them strictly for the most talented children without influential backgrounds. That's why Levi was always rejected by every single agency at the doorstep, not even the security guards bothering to entertain his wishful request. Don't worry, I have a plan to convince her. Shia smirked. Sometime later, Shia was seen sitting at a well-decorated coffee table on top of a hardened concrete roof, unlike the rest of the buildings near it. The roof was covered with a massive, transparent white tent, protecting it from the intensity of the sun while also bathing it in a warm light. Although the roof was made of concrete, it was hidden beneath a lush garden with a wooden path leading to the rooftop door. Shia sat at a table beside a patch of crimson flowers that resembled roses, but with crystallized petals that reflected light like gemstones. As Shia took a sip of peppermint tea, her eyes were affixed on those gleaming flowers, taking in their refreshing smell. But soon, she averted her gaze after picking up on the rooftop door opening. A gorgeous middle-aged woman entered, dressed in a milky white sundress and adorned with gold accessories on her neck, ears, fingers, and wrists. Her short, wavy brunette hair fell slightly over her smooth forehead. Light makeup highlighted her mature beauty, so much so that it seemed to outshine even the vibrant garden around her. This was Madame Naima Morningstar, the true household head of the Morningstar family and the second in command within the Bloodhunters Agency. She might not be as powerful as her husband, but her administrative skills and ambitious mindset were the ones keeping the family and agency in order. Idris Morningstar was more of a figurehead, whose job was to simply kill, destroy, and win. Such a power couple was feared and respected even outside of Heliodor's region. When Madame Nima saw Shia sitting on the soft futon like a hooligan, one arm resting on her knee, her thin eyebrows furrowed in quiet disapproval. "Chima, haven't I told you to act right?" Madame Nima chided, her voice stern but delicate. "You are representing the Morningstar lineage outside, and if the youngest daughter acts in this manner, won't they think of us as savages behind doors?" "Hi, daughter. Hi, Mom. How are you? Were you hurt in the harrowing forest? I heard someone placed an assassination hit on you. I was worried sick about you." "Don't be. I can take care of myself." Shia narrowed her eyes irritably. Isn't this how conversations between moms and daughters are supposed to be after a near-death experience? Instead, you are nagging me over my posture. You aren't dead. Don't be melodramatic. It's unbefitting. Plus, your father is already looking into the assassination attempt. Madame Numa scowled as she sat next to her daughter, not bothered in the slightest by Shia's criticism of her reaction. "I told you to pick any of the blood crystal flowers behind you and commence your evolution, but you rejected it and chose to search for it on your own, almost killing yourself in the process." Madame added indifferently while pouring a cup of tea for herself. "Be responsible for your decisions." Shia's heart chilled as she gazed at her mother's emotionless look, realizing that more than ever, she had no love for her. She almost died in the forest, and while she understood that it was on her, Shia still expected, wished, for just a hint of care or worry from her mother. Alas, her blood was as cold as an icy sea. Shia buried her emotions at the bottom of her heart and said expressionlessly, "You're right. I was asking for too much." "Good. A Morningstar should never seek compassion or empathy. In this cruel world, such emotions are delicacies for night crawlers." Madame Ima advised with a nod of approval. "Thank you. I will keep it in mind." Shia gritted her teeth for a split second, and then reclaimed her composure. "Why have you asked for me?" Madame Numa glanced at a classic golden watch on her wrist and said, "I have 4 meetings after breakfast. Make it quick. I need a recommendation letter." Shia went straight to the point, no longer having any interest in bonding with her mother. 4. I need it for my friend. What's his background and potential? Madame Naima immediately entered into business mode, believing that her rebellious daughter, who refused to accept any favors from them, wouldn't lower her pride for just anyone. Orphan native, SS potential. SS potential? Madame Naima raised an eyebrow in surprise, knowing that such ratings were given only to genuine geniuses born with unique qualities. Instead of telling her about him, Shia requested Astra AI to show his 3D holographic image. As Madame Nima stared at the massive blue-colored holographic figure, she couldn't help but ask in intrigue, "How old is this fine specimen? And what's his name?" 16 years old. Shia smirked. "He is called Arthur Larson." 16 years old? He has already reached this height and weight? Look at those refined muscles. He looks like he can lift an entire car. Madame Naima's pupils widened in shock, a rare display of emotion. "I told you, he has SS potential. I'm sure the Nightcrawlers in the Assembly and other agencies will fight tooth and nail over him." Shia said, "Who wouldn't? I can already see him being a powerhouse in the future." Madame said solemnly, "Shia, make sure to recruit him to our agency. If you need more than a recommendation letter to convince him, don't hesitate to ask." Madame Naima understood that genetic qualities were one of the most important factors that decided one's potential and limitations. Sure, the chosen Nightcrawler was still the main decider of a Daywalker's limitation, but it helped a lot to have a talented human as a partner and not a deadweight. That's because when the Shadow Life seed unlocked rewards for the hosts, it tapped into both the genetic pool of the Nightcrawlers and humans to define the best evolutionary path. In other words, if Arthur chose an enhancement specialization Nightcrawler, their raw strength would be absolutely barbaric since their seed will be taking advantage of both of their amazing genetic codes. After all, the seed considered both humans and Nightcrawlers as its hosts, which meant it would accelerate their evolution simultaneously as long as they had actual noteworthy traits to evolve. On the other hand, if an average human were chosen, the seed would rely mostly on the Nightcrawler's DNA for their evolutionary path. This was what usually happened. "I will see what I can do." Shia stood up after receiving an email with a recommendation letter signed by her mother. Anyone between the ages of 12 and 21 could use this letter to enter the contract ritual assembly, even if they were in a wheelchair. Usually, the letters came with the names of the bestowed owners to ensure no fraud happened. But Madame Ima didn't need to do this, as she trusted her daughter would never try to pull a fast one on her. The family's rules were simply too strict, and if she did such a foolish thing to ruin their family's reputation, the punishment awaiting her wasn't for the weak. As Madame Nima watched the back of her daughter walking towards the door, she glanced at the crystal blood flower garden and offered, "Why don't you take a flower with you? You have already wasted 6 months being a junior daywalker. Your younger cousins will surpass you in no time like this. I wish them all the best." Not bothering to stop for even a moment or turn around, Shia walked out of the door and entered the glass elevator. After it closed behind her, Madame Naima was left alone. But one should never forget, in this world, you would never be alone. Your daughter is feisty as always. A sudden, alluring voice echoed in Madame Naima's ears, coming from a giant red rose with pitch-black stems and thorns. It slithered down her sleeveless robe like a whip. "Leave her, Rosemorn. She is in her teenage rebellious years, just like I was." Madame Nima replied calmly while sipping her tea. "A day will come when she will grow up and understand us. If she kept moving at this pace, I doubt she would make it out alive." Rosemorn giggled, her toothless mouth appearing on the bottom petal of the crimson rose. "If she dies, it only means she isn't strong enough for this world or what lies behind it." Madame murmured as she gazed at the clear sky. "Maybe it's a much merciful way to go." In Tamara's settlement, a sudden call interrupted Levi's cultivation session. When he asked Astra about the caller and found out it was Shia's, he paused his cultivation and took the call. After greeting each other, Shia went straight to the subject and told him that she had secured the recommendation letter for him. So quick? How? Levi was left surprised. He knew the importance of recommendation letters for each agency, and he expected it would take Shia a great effort to convince her agency to waste it on a blind kid. Shia went on and explained what she did to secure it, leaving Levi speechless at her boldness. He knew that if he used the recommendation letter plan for Arthur, everyone in the assembly would give the Morningstar family funny looks. After all, those letters were the same as sponsorship, putting immense focus on the chosen candidates. If they were found to have used it on someone blind, it would do great damage to their reputation. As long as Arthur puts on a great show and chooses our agency at the end, I will be fine, she has said casually. I see. Levi chuckled. I believe you don't see much hope in me not embarrassing your family in the assembly, right? Shia's giggle was heard from over the phone. You think too lowly of me. As much as I want you to embarrass my family's name, I have a feeling that you will give us an unforgettable show. Is that so? Levi smiled, feeling somewhat appreciative of her belief. But it's just a feeling, don't let it get over your head. Shia suddenly warned. The yearly assembly is an opportunity for which all candidates prepare extensively. They might not be daywalkers yet, but some monsters appear once in a while who can even defeat Stage 2 rookie daywalkers while still being civilians. It's going to be much, much worse for you. Do you know why? Yes. Levi nodded. Levi understood that his spiritual vision could work only on daywalkers or night crawlers. Since the assembly would involve normal civilians, his spiritual vision would capture nothing. Simply put, he was going in completely unprepared against opponents who had been trained in martial arts, sword fighting, and other battle skills since birth, all ready for this very moment. This was no daydream of a child who thought that being blind might give one an advantage in battles. This was real life, and being blind was a massive disability, especially if one wasn't already well trained to fight while being blind. Levi might have been training his body, building great muscles, and even learning boxing on the side, but he wasn't vexed in battles at all. This showed during the harrowing forest. If you know, then I hope you take the safer trials and just surrender when it comes to battles. Shia advised him. No need to get badly wounded over nothing. No one will take mercy on you, as they know that night crawlers prefer candidates with cold hearts, who wouldn't hesitate to do anything for the sake of growth. Thank you for your concerns, Levi said appreciatively. Shia went quiet for a few seconds and then sighed helplessly. Then, she changed the subject, having a strong feeling that Levi was going to do what he wanted to do. I am in the capital right now. Once I purchase the required materials, I will return to Tamara. Shia asked, You will need a lab, right? Most preferably. Levi nodded. Levi already obtained the full formula for Bleeder's Tier 3 Perfect Evolution from Ash Krell. He knew it would require a lab, as the procedure involved many tools. Then I will rent out a public one. Shia said, If it were up to me, I would have brought you to my agency or family's labs. But they are highly monitored, and I can't promise that your knowledge won't be stolen. Since evolutionists were considered one of the most lucrative and rewarding careers besides being a daywalker in this day and age, many businessmen had chosen to build public labs for the less fortunate. After all, not everyone could afford an entire lab with its expensive pieces of equipment. Thus, the public labs were born and were rented by the hour for any aspiring evolutionists or traveling ones from different regions. Security was ensured through nocturnal contracts due to the sensitivity of those sessions, as not even the owner had the right to pry inside a used lab. No worries, a public lab will do wonders. Good. See you later then. Evie sat in a round, plastic blue tub filled with steaming water, his body submerged up to the shoulders. He had started his nightly sessions a few hours ago, and unlike the reckless attempt on his first night, he was now following a more disciplined approach. He'd created a temporary training schedule, limiting himself to one cultivation session per hour. This allowed his body enough time to fully recover before diving in again. Between sessions, he filled smaller containers with cold water and poured them into the large bathroom tub for later use. The method gave him an extra 10 seconds of cultivation time during each round, but he was beginning to question whether the benefits were worth the cost. The water bill's going to be insane if I keep this up, Levi thought, standing up and stepping out of the tub. Might even put me on some government watch list. He knew full well how tightly water and other natural resources were monitored. In their world, governed by the laws of the holy light, each region could only use the resources available within its blessed territory or rely on imports from neighboring lands. Anything beyond that was always at risk of exposure to night crawlers. Fortunately, Heliodor's region stretched just enough over the Atlantic Ocean to secure a sustainable water supply under the holy light's protection. A wide river also separated it from the adjacent settlement of Sale, further boosting their independence. Still, that didn't mean they could waste resources without scrutiny. The government monitored all usage closely, especially for residents in small households like Levi's, just him and his brother. If he kept consuming this much water every night, it was only a matter of time before someone took notice. Well, it did help me reach 5% faster than expected, Levi muttered. Time to retire this method. A small smile played on his lips as he activated his spiritual vision. Examining the seed embedded within him, he noted the fine network of cracks. He had passed the 5% mark, just barely, but enough. The near-death experience from his first night of training had unlocked a genetic trait, granting him high resistance to heat. That breakthrough made a huge difference. Now, even training just once an hour, he was progressing just as fast as before. Do I have to show the tattoo to unlock the rewards? He asked his partner while drying himself with a towel. It's mandatory, Ashcrow replied, snickering faintly. Levi's brow twitched. He muttered the incantation, and moments later, the three-seeded, black-inked tattoo bloomed into existence on his tailbone. One of the seeds now glowed with a faint crimson light. Though he couldn't see it, he felt a mild burning sensation. Nothing alarming and nothing unexpected. He'd read everything about the reward system. This was standard. Without hesitation, Levi reached behind him and touched the glowing seed. The instant his fingers made contact like pressing a hidden button, his body went limp and slumped onto the couch, falling into unconsciousness. While it might have seemed ordinary from the outside, in truth, Levi's consciousness had been transported inside the nine senses seed. As the light adjusted to his spiritual vision, he found himself standing atop a vast, perfectly still surface of red water. Red? Shouldn't it be colorless? Levi blinked, caught off guard. Lifting his head, he immediately spotted the source of the crimson hue beneath him. For the first time, his usually soulless eyes that had driven thousands of night crawlers into despair, flickered with a trace of emotion. What the? Those were the only words he could manage to utter, his mouth slightly agape as he gazed at a massive scarlet tree, glowing gently like a living flame and stretching across the entirety of the rooted plain. Its fiery glow painted the sky in deep crimson, mirrored perfectly by the still water beneath it. The reflection was so flawless it gave the illusion of two trees joined at their base, one reaching toward the heavens, the other sinking into the depths. It felt ancient, sacred, as though it held secrets older than time. Where am I? Is this really the infamous rooted plain? Levi murmured, eyes wide with awe. He recalled reading that once a daywalker completed a stage or broke through a plateau, they were transported alongside their contracted nightcrawler into the rooted plain, a spiritual dimension within the seed, home to its will and consciousness. From what he understood, one was supposed to encounter a modest 10-meter shadow life tree, a small golden tree whose reflection revealed a shadowy twin beneath. This illusion was how it earned its name, Shadow Life. But what stood before him now was something else entirely. The crimson tree was unimaginably vast, so massive it dwarfed comprehension. It felt less like a tree and more like a world tree, something out of legend. Just then, a familiar voice spoke up from his shoulder. "Boy, I've already told you to forget everything you've read about daywalkers," Ashcrow said calmly. This is no ordinary place. This is the ancestral rooted plane. You should be honored to be here. Ancestral rooted plane, Levi echoed, still stunned. Just what kind of seed do you have? His curiosity about Ashcrowl and his mysterious seed was growing by the day, but the little prick had no intention of revealing anything. You haven't earned that knowledge yet. Tis, click your tongue all you want. Nothing changes, Ashcrowl chuckled. Realizing he'd get nowhere with questions, Levi shook his head and turned his attention to the task at hand. All right then. How do I activate the reward station? Same as with the Shadow Life seed. Yes. Just speak your request, and it will appear. Levi nodded, then cleared his throat and spoke with a respectful tone. I respectfully request consideration for a reward in recognition of my contributions to the seed's growth. Ashcrowl rolled his eye. So dramatic, he muttered. You could have just said, I want my reward. But Levi wasn't about to use such casual words, not when standing before a tree the size of a celestial body. As his words traveled across the still surface, the red water rippled slightly. When the sound reached the tree, a sudden burst of light erupted, blinding Levi's spiritual vision. He raised his arms to shield his eyes. When the flash faded, he slowly lowered his hands, only to find himself stunned for the second time in minutes. Before him stood a massive wall of nonagon-shaped crimson leaves, millions of them, arranged neatly to form a monumental nine-sided flower. The outermost leaves were dim, but those near the center blazed brightly, creating a surreal image of a half-lit, radiant blossom. Levi stared in awe. Then, with disbelief in his voice, he turned to Ashcrowl. Are those all abilities you've mastered? Yes, Ashcrowl replied as if it were nothing. But Levi knew better. Anyone who saw this would instantly realize this was anything but normal. Ancestral rooted plane? Millions of mastered abilities? Nothing about this seed, or its master, was ordinary. Why the surprise? Ashcrowl said casually. I've lived a long time. These are just fragments of my accumulated experience. How long did you live to reach this level of madness? Levi muttered, still dazed. His shock was understandable. Most daywalkers began their journey with Tier 3 or 4 nightcrawlers, Tier 5 if they were gifted. A Tier 5 might have mastered 100 abilities at most. With each breakthrough, the daywalker would enter the rooted plane and randomly unlock one ability from that limited pool. But this? Millions? Levi couldn't even process the scale. All you need to know, Ashcrowl said annoyedly, slapping the back of Levi's neck with his tiny wing, is that I don't have the patience I used to. So, quit wasting time and claim your reward. We've got 2 months to prepare you for candidates who were trained before they could walk. Fine, Levi muttered. Keep your secrets, old bat. Levi focused on the sea of red leaves, knowing that each leaf represented a mastered ability. Without further ado, Levi floated towards the gigantic Nanagon flower, feeling like he was standing before an endless library of abilities. Instead of overwhelming him, Levi felt more excited than ever about his path as he could see just how insane its potential was. While it was impossible to unlock all abilities through his evolutionary path, it didn't really matter since he could learn them on his own. Those rewards were simply acting as instantaneous power-ups, which didn't take away from his ability to learn them on his own. Since you're still Tier 1, does this mean I can choose abilities from this entire lineup? Levi inquired as he stood before the dimmest lineup of leaves at the very bottom of the flower. Yes, if you want the central abilities, you have to reach the appropriate power level to wield them, Ashcrowl replied calmly. Otherwise, it will be the same as owning a useless brick. True, Levi nodded in understanding. While this might be disappointing to some, Levi understood that it was much more effective to own low-level abilities that matched his current power than to be greedy for the strongest one on the wall. After all, abilities cost energy depending on their complexity, effects, and results. If someone was capable of casting a storm-based ability, their energy reserve must be deep to afford it. Otherwise, by the time the storm manifested, it would fade away just as fast. Before you pick, I will give you a small tip to limit the randomness, Ashcrowl said while flying towards the leftmost side of the Nonagon. Then, he pointed his wing toward it and explained to Levi that each side of the nonagon represented one of the 9 senses. The side he was indicating stood for the sense of smell, and every ability locked along that section from the base up to the midpoint was linked to that particular sense. I see. Levi raised an eyebrow in surprise. This helps a lot. Levi knew that picking abilities randomly from the 9 senses wasn't effective at all. After all, he was told that he couldn't wield 3 unique senses at his current level, which meant if he were to unlock abilities related to them, he was screwed. Even abilities related to sight were going to be limited immensely since he was missing his eyes, and his spiritual vision was considered a unique sense on its own. But now, he could pick a path and focus on it until he got decently good at it before deciding to choose abilities from another side. After Ashkral finished showing each side and its related sense, he went to sit on top of Levi's shoulder. You have a sense of touch, smell, hearing, and taste to pick from. You can even choose the spirit sense, but I highly advise against it at the moment. Ashkral shared. Unlike other senses, the spirit sense consumes spiritual energy exclusively to use any kind of ability or technique. I understand. Levi nodded. While I have a decent spiritual energy source, if I chose the spirit sense, I would be locking myself in a psyche path. Bingo! Ashkral tapped him on the head. Levi could be considered a gifted soul when it came to psyche specialization, as no one at his age dared to dream of owning such immense spiritual vision. Since spiritual vision could be used only if one possessed the necessary mental prowess to wield it, the fact that Levi was able to wield it continuously for an entire day meant that his pool of energy was unmatched. However, choosing this path at the very start wasn't ideal, especially for him, when he had other options. Pick wisely. The moment you make your choice, it will be your primary sense for the first rank, Ashkral advised. Does that mean I won't be unlocking any other ability from the other senses? You can, but it's most effective to pick the first rewards from one side until you build a decent fighting style. Then you can start freestyling with your senses until you perfect it. Ashkral added, my previous partners each chose their primary sense and made a stance out of it. Stances? Levi inquired. He knew what it implied, but he wasn't too sure when it came to Ashkral and his dead gang of partners. You can consider them as battle arts. There is the Echo Keeper stance, hearing, Phantom Touch stance, touch, Essence Seeker stance, smell, Soul Taster stance, taste, and Truth Visionary stance, sight. Ashkral clarified calmly. Each stance uses one sense primarily, while reducing its weaknesses with the powers of other senses. Of course, each stance has its preferred style of weapons. Interesting. Levi rubbed his chin thoughtfully, understanding that his current choice would determine a decent part of his journey. Still, his perfectionist tendencies kicked in, and he couldn't help but ask, will it be possible to master all stances and learn the same amount of abilities as you? Ashkral chuckled, but he wasn't being sarcastic. He looked at Levi and smirked. Why ask if it's possible when a living example of its feasibility is standing before you? You're right. Levi smiled back. Although he knew that the 3-body problem was going to be the major obstacle stopping him from fulfilling such an achievement, Levi didn't allow it to kill his dream. He never compared himself to others, and this made him want to learn from the past partners of Ashkral, but not take their choices as his. He felt this way in dealing with the 3-body problem and their lifelong progress. Levi floated in front of the side with auditory-based abilities and said, my hearing has become my primary sense after I lost my eyes. I don't know about the others, but I know choosing auditory-based abilities in the early stages will help me in the long run. Levi could be said to have trained his ears to quite a supernatural degree compared to the average human. He was able to pick up on the faintest whispers amidst the noise and even hear other people's heartbeats if they were close. He didn't know if this was related to his radiant bloodline empowering his ears after he lost his eyes or not, but he always felt his ears to be special, much more special than the average blind person, as they were also known to have their senses attuned after losing their sight. Smart choice. Ashkral approved. He also wanted Levi to choose this path. Although Levi didn't need Ashkral's approval, hearing it had set his heart at peace with his choice. Without further ado, Levi reached out with his hand and picked one of the dimmest scarlet leaves on the auditory sense section. The moment he touched it, the entire nonagon flower collapsed into the still ocean underneath him. Levi glanced at it disappear for a moment with an eager smile, seemingly incapable of waiting until the next time he summoned it again. For now, he switched his focus to the leaf in his hand. Taking a deep breath, Levi turned the leaf slowly, knowing that the ability's name and its details were written in Elthorian language on its back. When his spiritual vision landed on the name and its details, he couldn't help but gasp in astonishment. / echolocation. It's an ability that detects objects and surroundings by sending out or receiving sound waves and interpreting the echoes that bounce back. / Echolocation. To unlock this as your first ability, your luck isn't too shabby. Even Ashcrowl raised an eyebrow in surprise. This is massive, Levi exclaimed in delight. Doesn't this mean I can paint a new world in my mind through bouncing sound waves? Levi understood that this ability was vastly different than simply being able to hear better. The ability to bounce sound waves and interpret their echoes was massive for someone blind, as it enabled him to manifest a similar copy of our world through sounds. It was more or less a vision through sound. Boy, aren't you looking down on me? Ashcrowl sneered. That's the simplest utilization of echolocation, which was mastered by other nightcrawlers with similar ability. Do you mean? Levi felt his heart skip a beat at the sudden realization of what Ashcrowl implied. Ashcrowl didn't hesitate to spell out for him. Every ability I have learned was mastered to perfection. Ashcrowl smirked. In simpler terms, your unlocked echolocation is nowhere near the same quality as similar abilities. Can you tell me of one example? Levi asked excitedly. Tap the leaf on your forehead and you will absorb all the knowledge related to the ability. Ashcrowl waved his hand lazily. Remembering that he had the answers in his hand, Levi swiftly placed the leaf on his forehead and watched it melt into his skin, breaking into light particles. After it disappeared fully, he felt a slight tingle of pain, and then a wave of knowledge assaulted his mind, filling his spiritual vision with thousands of images and letters. In less than a second, the images disappeared, and Levi's vision returned to the ancestral rooted plane. As he turned his head to Ashcrowl, Levi couldn't help but utter from the bottom of his heart, "You are a true monster." "I know," Ashcrowl chuckled. "Now, let's choose your first signature weapon." The moment Ashcrowl said this, a crimson platform rose from the still water until it reached Levi's height. Its base was crafted from red roots entangled into a tough dread, while its surface bore Elthorian inscriptions etched along the edges. At the center, a hollow, three-dimensional crimson nonagon orb spun slowly, capturing Levi's attention. The crafting station. "It looks different here," Levi murmured. He had read that daywalkers would typically encounter a tree-based platform, which they referred to as the crafting station. It was named as such because they would place their contracted nightcrawlers upon it and transform them into whatever weapon they envisioned. But this crimson orb was something new. Ashcrowl jumped into the orb and said calmly, "Don't overthink it. The crafting process is the same as the others. The only difference lies in the quality of the weapon and the range of your imagination." "You mean I can craft any weapon I desire? Even ones that change form or have shifting states?" Levi raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Go wild," Ashcrowl replied lazily. "Just make sure the weapon you choose unlocks the most potential of this specific evolutionary path." Since Levi had 3 evolutionary paths, it meant he would unlock a weapon at 5% progress for each path. He had already asked, and Ashcrowl had told him that while each weapon could activate abilities from other paths, the outcomes would vary depending on how extreme the choice was. This meant he needed to choose a different type of weapon for each path, making sure they complemented and interconnected with each other. "Easier said than done," Levi murmured. Knowing this choice was crucial, perhaps even more important than his abilities. Levi took a seat and prepared to think it through carefully. There are 3 categories of weapons: melee, ranged, and mental. Every weapon in existence falls into one of those. Levi began listing weapons in his mind. Swords, katanas, staffs, polearms, daggers, rapiers, axes, bows, rifles, shotguns, sniper rifles, mind orbs, and so on. There were hundreds of possibilities, and that was just the known ones. Levi knew many daywalkers had gotten creative with their weapons, just like Shia. She wielded a crescent-bladed glaive, a hybrid between two weapon types that vastly expanded her fighting style. Then there was Mantis, who used weapons that mirrored the form of his nightcrawler's preying arms. This made Levi understand that creativity was not only allowed but encouraged. Nothing was holding him back. Still, he didn't let his imagination run wild just yet. The best weapon for me is the one I feel most comfortable wielding, Levi frowned. But I've never used a weapon in my life. That's why daywalker candidates are trained from a young age, Ashcrowl said casually. Some families focus on a single nightcrawler species or battle art for this reason. Levi nodded, aware that many lineage families followed the practice path of their firstborn daywalkers. This lets them build legacies around specific battle arts and pass down refined techniques more effectively. A newborn daywalker forging their own path would rarely surpass a candidate from an established line, assuming equal talent and dedication. Of course, this only worked if their first daywalker reached great heights. Otherwise, their potential would plateau. There weren't many families that met such a standard, so most let their daywalkers choose their weapons while mandating similar nightcrawler types. Just like Shia and her Morningstar lineage family. Though they all practiced the same blood arts, each member was free to choose their own weapon. This diversity gave rise to many distinct blood arts, even within the same bloodline. The only tool I've ever used that even slightly resembled a weapon is my white cane. Levi smiled wryly. Can you suggest something that fits me? Levi decided to ask for Ashcrowl's help, trusting that such an ancient being must have seen every possibility by now. Why waste time when he could draw on that wisdom? I believe a staff would suit you, at least in the beginning, Ashcrowl suggested. A staff. Levi thought for a moment. It made sense. A staff would work well with sound-based abilities. It could produce loud noises and help him measure the distance between himself and his enemies. But if you choose a different weapon for another evolutionary path, say, a bow, the switching time will be noticeable, Ashcrowl warned. If the weapon shapes are too extreme, the shift won't be instantaneous. How long does it take to switch? 2 seconds if the difference is extreme, like switching from a bow to a shield. 2 seconds. That's not so bad, Levi muttered. 2 seconds might seem short now, but later you'll realize just how long it truly is. Ashcrowl left it at that, letting Levi interpret the rest. That complicates things, Levi murmured, massaging his temples. Ashcrowl's opinion couldn't be taken lightly. If he said 2 seconds was dangerous, Levi had to take it seriously and re-evaluate his options. Can I take a day to think it over? Levi asked. Take as long as you need. Just remember, choosing a weapon isn't a matter of time. It's a matter of feeling. A calling, Ashcrowl said. It's hard to find that call without testing a few out first. I understand. Levi agreed. He understood this wasn't something to solve by thinking through pros and cons alone. It required a physical connection, experience. After all, no weapon was without weakness. As Ashcrowl left the ancestral-rooted plane, Levi took one last glance at the colossal crimson tree and whispered, "Will you kindly show me the way?" Then, he willed himself awake, and the crimson seed respected his wish, booting his consciousness back to the real world. The moment Levi woke up, he had to clamp his hands over his ears in agony as a wave of deafening noise assaulted him. Arg! It's so loud! He groaned, the sounds of his neighbor's footsteps pounding like thunderclaps beneath him. Outside was even worse. Though it was just before dawn, the city buzzed with activity as if it were midday. The city remained constantly lit to prevent the formation of Stygian gates in its center, which made sleep almost impossible without SR pills. Since SR pills only lasted for 2 hours and temporarily refreshed one's body and mind, the traditional concept of day and night had become meaningless for many. Still holding his ears, Levi stumbled to the balcony, following the wave-like distortion that colored his world through sound. He reached out blindly, feeling for the window against the noise pollution. With great effort, he finally shut it, and some peace returned. Levi leaned against the window, then fell to his knees, hands still clamped over his ears like a frightened child. Ash Kral, what do I do? It's not stopping. It hurts. Levi pleaded internally, overwhelmed by the noise and the chaos within his own head. It was like someone was drumming right next to his ears, every vibration bouncing around in his dark, sound-painted world, creating unbearable noise. Don't panic, boy. It's normal. Your ears were significantly enhanced after integrating echolocation into your system. Ash Kral's voice echoed telepathically, bypassing the surrounding chaos. Breathe in and out. Focus solely on my voice. Nothing more, nothing less. Levi did as instructed, trying his best to concentrate solely on Ash Kral's voice while tuning out the cacophony. He was already well-trained at blocking out disturbing nightcrawler voices after a decade of exposure. Eventually, the painful roar dulled little by little until only Ash Kral's voice remained, repeating smugly, "Trampy, trampy, trampy." Bastard, Levi's lips twitched, but he clenched his jaw and stayed focused to keep dampening the noise. After getting his laugh, Ash Kral continued, "Normally, humans use their ears to focus on what they want to hear. But in your case, your ears were enhanced to match my perfected echolocation ability. So the formula reversed. Now, you'll be hearing everything all the time. And it's up to you to control what to listen to and what to block out. But don't worry. You've unlocked a perfectly mastered ability, which means there's no learning curve." Levi nodded in understanding. He realized that his initial panic had made the pain far worse than it actually was. That's because unlocking an ability automatically bestowed his body and mind with the necessary knowledge to use it, as though he had mastered it himself. Now that he was calm, Levi could hear muffled sounds in the background, like his head was submerged underwater. When he focused on a specific type of sound, it filtered itself to perfection, allowing him to hear exactly what was being said. "My wife's going to be pissed as hell. Burp. I reek of booze and women's perfume. Nah, I doubt she's up at this hour. Didn't you buy a whole bottle of SR pills? You don't know her like I do. Burp. That night demon doesn't sleep when I'm out." As he listened to the two men's unholy conversation, Levi stood and opened the balcony window, trusting that he had things under control. The moment the window opened, the muffled sounds jumped up an octave, but it wasn't nearly as painful as before. Levi ignored the chaotic flood of background noise and focused solely on the men's conversation, curious if he could determine their location. When he willed it, his ears responded like another limb, listening to commands as naturally as if he were moving his hand. Whoa! To his amazement, the sound waves bouncing between his ears and the two men's voices formed a wave-like bridge, linking them together. And that wasn't all. As his concentration deepened, his ears provided more and more detail. He could now see two vibrating gray silhouettes holding onto each other's shoulders as they staggered down the sidewalk. He could even make out the bottle of alcohol in one of their hands. "Here's a trick," Ash Kral said with a grin. "Place your finger on the sound bridge and try to focus on how their voices spread outward." Levi reached out and placed his finger within the sound bridge. Then he shifted his intent, no longer trying to listen to what was said, but to how it moved. Instantly, he gasped in wonder. The men's gray sound waves scattered outward, bouncing off roads, cars, people, buildings, and everything they touched. And each time the waves struck a surface, be it glass, concrete, metal, or trees, the frequencies altered slightly, bouncing back in different colors. Somehow, each material reflected a different hue. This painted a living, breathing fragment of the city inside Levi's dark world. Vivid, strange, and full of life, all from a single conversation. As he stood on the balcony, gazing with his ears at this new world blooming before him, a soft smile spread across his lips. "I never knew sounds could look this beautiful." For the first time in a decade, Levi didn't feel like he was blind. Although he was seeing with his ears, creating a distorted and a bit chaotic view of the world, he appreciated it more than anything else. This is only the beginning. Ashkral smirked. If you were to master sound and vibrations, you would be perceiving the world 100 times clearer than an average human. When Levi heard this, he couldn't help but feel enthusiastic about such a promising future. Soon, he stopped eavesdropping on the drunken men and canceled out all the noises, muffling them again. It was like he could turn himself deaf with a snap of a finger. This was just as great as using sounds to map out his world, knowing that such a peaceful silence was a wish for many. Just one ability was enough to turn me into a superhuman, Levi commented with a spirited tone. I know many junior daywalkers possessing 6 unlocked abilities, and an ultimate one won't be able to contest against the quality of echolocation even if they combine them all. Levi wasn't exaggerating at all. He felt like he was fully in control of sounds with a single ability. This state wasn't easily obtained since most daywalkers unlocked low-quality abilities with a single effect, such as water bullets, sound blasts, empowered punches, etc. On the other hand, echolocation was perfected to the point it gave Levi the illusion that he was a master of sounds. But of course, he knew that wasn't real. Although your sound manipulation works great only with effects related to echolocation, it gave you a sample of what peak sound manipulation looks like. Ashkral said calmly, now that you have unlocked sound manipulation, it's up to you to start creating your own techniques. Battle arts were born out of those learned techniques. Each daywalker had their own way of mastering the evolutionary traits of their partner nightcrawlers. Nightcrawlers with evolutionary traits related to elements allowed the seeds to provide their partnered humans with similar control over those traits. Usually, the main evolutionary trait appeared at the first stage, 5%, which implied that daywalkers could embark on their battle arts road from the very beginning. In the case of Levi, Ashkral was a freak of nature that was considered beyond the unique specialization, which meant Levi could unlock multiple main evolutionary traits. Each one could come with an element, physical enhancement, or even spiritual empowerment. At this moment, he unlocked the main evolutionary trait of sound manipulation. Understand. Levi nodded solemnly. I am up for the challenge. Good. I have no plans on taking it easy on you. A few hours later, Levi received a call from Shia while he was training his echolocation ability. Ashkral told him that he would start teaching him sound manipulation lessons after he was done with the assembly. After all, there was no point in teaching him something he couldn't use openly. It made more sense to spend the limited time they had refining what was already in his arsenal, shaping it into a solid fighting style that could give him an edge in the assembly. Sometime later, Levi hung up and called for his brother. Arthur emerged from his room with panda eyes and a depressed look. Brew, why is the Ilthorian language so damn complex? Arthur sighed helplessly as he lay on the couch with tins of holograms still open. It's complex only at the beginning. Once you get the hang of its grammar and phonetics, it will be as simple as English. Levi comforted, using his voice to bounce off his brother's figure in the living room. This allowed him to see his brother's gray silhouette sitting on the couch behind him without needing to turn his head. It was like he had a 360 sound vision strapped on his head. Grammar and phonetics? Isn't that everything? Arthur cried, grieving over his future self. Arthur's pain could be understood. It was indeed extremely difficult to learn the Ilthorian language. Unfortunately for him, it was a must to know its basics at least to avoid the same choke he had in the forest. That's because all solar totems required incantations using the Ilthorian language to activate them. Stop whining. It's your fault for missing so much in classes. Levi walked to the closet without needing to touch the walls. Each step he took created a path. Then he pulled out his classic black hoodie and pants. After he wore them, he put on circular black glasses and told his brother to get dressed as well. We're going out. Arthur's eyes sparkled immediately. He was under house arrest by Levi until he finished the books he was given, leaving only for the gym and errands. Shia has got hold of the necessary materials for her evolution. Levi shared, we will meet up near the experimental Tamara's lab in 10 minutes. Say less. Arthur swiftly went to his room and wore a dark blue tracksuit with black sneakers, appearing like he was going for a run. While Levi didn't need his white cane anymore, he still brought it out with him. No one knew of his awakening, and he had no intentions of giving out any weird signs. After all, if he were found to have signed a contract in an unofficial way, he would be forced to either show the details of his contract or be eradicated. Ash Crowell had assured Levi that he had the contract laundering in the assembly under his control. All he had to do was keep a low profile until then. While Levi didn't know how exactly Ash Crowell was going to pull it off when his body was inked and the contract was signed, he could only put his trust in him and focus on what he could do. Sometime later, Arthur was seen driving their dirt bike recklessly, weaving back and forth between the vehicles. After he was brought to the hospital, he requested the authorities to collect his bike, which was left behind in the outpost. Since he was being investigated and they wanted his full cooperation, the authorities helped him out. If they were to see the way he was driving, they would definitely have regrets. Meanwhile, Shia, Jamal, and Sergio were standing near a small line of people in front of a reflective glass double door. A massive sign was on top of it that read, "Experimental Tamara's Lab." The building was 3 stories high and had external glass windows, just like most buildings around it. Although it wasn't the biggest in the city, it sure was crowded. VRRR. VRRR. Suddenly, everyone's attention was attracted to the sound of heavy electric revs coming from the back. When they glanced behind them, everyone's expressions turned pale at the sight of a speeding dirt bike rushing towards them with seemingly no intention of pulling the brakes. The queue was cleared out almost instantly as no one dared to stay in the bike's path beside Shia, Jamal, and Sergio. As they gazed at the driver's humongous figure, their eyelids twitched, recognizing him to be Arthur immediately, even though he was wearing a helmet. KRRR. Arthur hit the brakes sharply and stopped sideways a mere couple of meters away, not one of them getting phased. "What's up?" Arthur greeted with a wide grin after removing the helmet, uncaring about the rain of curses falling on him from the people in the queue. "Arthur, drive safely or you won't know how you died," Jamal advised. "Don't worry, my driving skills are flawless." Arthur bragged while joining their friends with Levi beside him. "That's not what he meant," Levi said sternly. "I have warned you many times that high-ranked daywalkers are hiding everywhere, and if you were to piss one off with your driving, they might retaliate." You can get killed off driving a bike." Arthur was speechless. "Are we living in a jungle?" "Yes," Shia said calmly. "The faster you accept that we are living in a jungle of concrete and glass, the longer you will survive." Arthur believed that at most, he would be getting a speeding or reckless driving ticket, not death. He assumed that even daywalkers needed to respect the laws within the holy region, and they wouldn't assault a citizen for something this trivial. Alas, this was an ideal outcome. In reality, high-ranked daywalkers were extremely unpredictable, and if they were to be annoyed while they were already in a bad mood, one should expect the worst. She had demonstrated the laws of the jungle immediately, as she skipped the entire queue, and the guard still opened up the gate for her, uncaring about the protests of those staying in the queue for hours. She didn't even bother to reserve a slot. A single phone call was enough to get her the best lab at any time she desired. The Morningstar surname sure does wonders, Arthur exclaimed enviously as he walked with Levi behind them. "Status is a universal key to all the doors in the world," Levi replied calmly, using his voice and other noises to map out the ground floor. It resembled a hotel with dozens of numbered doors situated near each other. The receptionists were standing at the center of the floor around a circular table. There were already many people inside. Levi used his spiritual vision to separate the daywalkers from citizens, now that his echolocation could show him a humanoid figure of everyone. Of course, if there were daywalkers, their contracted nightcrawlers would be there too. Once they spotted Levi, curiosity got the best of them, and they went to check him out. This time, Ash Crowell wasn't nearby to use his terrifying voice and reputation to scare them off. But Levi had other allies. "The F***CK, are you looking at?" Bleeder growled murderously. "Stay in your lane, or else it won't end pretty for you or your little partners." "Believe me, he means it," Oro chuckled. This isn't the time to get on his bad side. Sensing the murderous intent of Bleeder made all the Nightcrawlers reconsider getting involved in this situation, especially when they had nothing to win from this alteration besides teasing Levi for their amusement. "Thank you," Levi whispered. "Never thank me again," Bleeder smirked. "You are my little treasure, and I will never let any harm befall you." Levi chuckled, knowing that Bleeder would literally do anything to not jeopardize his chance at a perfect evolution. "Miss Shia, please follow me to your lab." Meanwhile, Shia finished with the lab's arrangement and was led to the elevator by the cute receptionist. The others tagged along too, and in no time, they arrived at the highest floor in the building. The moment the elevator door opened, Arthur whistled while holding his hands behind his head. The lab truly warranted such a reaction, as the entire floor was filled with all sorts of high-end equipment and machinery. Everything looked new and clean, from the glassware to the furniture. There were even AI-powered robotic arms for assistance. The receptionist extended her arm with a welcoming smile and said, "Welcome to our VIP experimental lab. Please, if you need anything, don't hesitate to call us. Our support is online 24/7. Thank you. This will be all for now." Shia wired a heavy tip to the receptionist after scanning her public information with her neural lens. All workers put their bank information among their public data to ensure a smooth tipping transaction without any awkwardness. The receptionist's smile widened after receiving the tip, leaving them to their peace immediately. "Now, this is a lab," Arthur commented in fascination as he walked around the place. But just as he was about to touch the equipment, one scolding glare from Shia made him retrieve it. "This must have been expensive. You didn't have to bother yourself." Levi smiled wryly. A standard lab is more than enough. Levi knew that the formula creation process was quite simple, even for an amateur, not requiring all of this heavy machinery. "I would rather not take any risks." Shia lifted a metallic chest and placed it on the nearest table. Then, after scanning the lock with her neural lens, a soft click echoed in everyone's ears. She opened the metallic chest, and the first thing that showed was the blood crystal flower inside a smaller plastic container. It was as glamorous as the ones in the garden. Yet, the obsidian blood vine had taken the spotlight with its ebony black vine and razor-sharp thorns. It had crystallized red drops running down its long, twisted vine, making it seem like it was weeping. The rest of the materials were also in the chest, ranging from peculiarly colored liquid bottles, small containers filled with dirt, and other types of common plants. Shia took hold of Levi's arm and pulled him in front of her chest. Then, she said with an eager smile, "Everything you have asked for is here." Levi started naming each material, just to be sure, and Shia kept saying check every time until he was done. Only then did he crack a satisfied smile. "You have carried your part of the deal. It's time for me to honor my word. I can't wait for the final results." Shia smiled. Without needing Levi to tell them to leave, Shia made a gesture with her head, and her companions followed her to the waiting room next to the lab. Since he hadn't sold her the knowledge and just made a deal to evolve her Nightcrawler, she had no right to spy on the creation of his evolutionary formula. This kind of knowledge was priced in the millions of credits, and she had no plans on asking her family for this much money, especially not with the current tension going on. After they left, their contracted Nightcrawlers followed them along, leaving only Levi and Arthur. Just as Arthur was about to speak, Levi placed a finger near his mouth to shush his brother, and then clapped twice. As he gazed at the bouncing sound waves inside the lab, Levi focused on any sort of leak. But to his pleasant surprise, he found that not a single wave escaped the lab. It was perfectly soundproof, ensuring utmost privacy. As expected of the best public lab in Tamara. "You can talk now. We are in the clear." Levi smiled. "I just wanted to know what you will need from me." Arthur rolled his sleeves, prepared to listen to his brother's instructions. "First, let's clean our hands and wear proper gear." Levi said, "I might have done my studies, but this is still my first time doing this, and we should take all precautions." "Got you." Arthur took his brother to the nearest sink. After they cleaned their hands and wore the proper gear, gloves, lab coats, glasses, etc., they returned to the chest of materials. "Now what?" Then, They stood in front of the chest of materials, resembling the famous cartoon characters Pinky and the Brain. Arthur looked as confused as ever, wearing the gloves on the wrong side, and his coat barely fit him, his muscles screaming to be released. While Levi was staring at the ceiling, while tapping his hands on the box to use the sound for some visualization. They looked like they had no business being anywhere near this fancy lab. If Shia was to see them, she would honestly start wondering if she had been scammed. Pull out everything and place them gently on the table. Levi doubled down. Be gentle. Arthur did as he was told and lined up all the materials on the long ceramic white table. Then he picked up the chest and placed it on the ground, clearing some space for them. Knowing that it would be bothersome to keep tapping his fingers for visualization throughout the process, Levi requested Astra AI to release a constant, low-pitched noise, one that was difficult for human ears to pick up on easily. Astra AI followed the instructions and released the low-pitched noise straight into Levi's ear since the device was the closest to it. But Levi tuned it out and focused on the visualization it created inside the lab. Since this was a sealed room and the sound wave was constant, all the equipment, furniture, walls, and such appeared grayed out and affixed in place. Levi took a moment to appreciate the stillness of the scene, fully aware that the moment he spoke, the delicate balance would be broken. His echolocation ability allowed him to interpret the echoes of sound waves bouncing off surfaces, even filtering out background noise to isolate a single sound with precision. But it came with a limitation. He couldn't actually hear the sounds themselves, nor witness their impact while the ability was active. This meant that unless he chose to ignore his own voice or whatever his brother might say, the moment he or anyone else spoke, the fragile silence would inevitably unravel. Let's begin. Levi requested his brother to bring out the required equipment, ranging from a mortar and pestle to a beaker. Arthur relied on Astra AI to help him find the equipment, which he had no idea what they looked like. While Arthur was collecting the pieces of equipment, Levi had already opened the container for the crystal blood flower. Although it appeared grayed out and had a bit of a chaotic form, Levi still reached out with his fingers and started getting a feel for its petals. After marking everything important, he picked up a scalpel and sliced the petals off the stem, making sure to be as clinical as possible. Scree. The moment he did this, Levi tilted his head slightly in confusion after his ears picked up on a very tame, high-frequency screech. It was so silent that Levi doubted if humans could even hear it. Is this the ultrasonic distress sounds I read about? Levi murmured. What? You heard something? Arthur looked around them in puzzlement. It's nothing, keep guiding me. Okay. Levi didn't trust his brother with the process as he knew that his burly hands weren't used to such agility-based, tiny movements. However, he was asking for his input every once in a while to ensure that he wasn't butchering the flower, especially now that he heard it scream. He had read that plants released ultrasonic distress sounds when cut or distressed. He also knew that it was their way of responding to harm, but not pain, as they lacked a nervous system. Still, hearing its low screeches with each cut made Levi feel an unexplainable amount of sorrow, especially when a red liquid was pouring out of the wounds, bleeding all over itself. If humans' ears were receptive to those high-frequency weeps, would it have changed our treatment of the plant kingdom? Levi wondered to himself after cutting off the crystal flower petals and placing them inside a small box. But as he listened to the final dying screeches of the blood crystal flower, he shook his head. He doubted anything would change, as he knew that it was within human nature to forego any morals for the sake of survival. As long as food was served on the table, nothing else mattered. If it weren't like this, many humans wouldn't turn to cannibalism when starvation shut off their brains and left only two wires active to seek food under any circumstances. He believed even the most veteran vegan would eat meat if no social constraints were placed on him and he were found starving. It was simply biology, and it was hard to resist it when no one was there to judge. After Levi pulled the flower's stem from the soil gently, he collected some of the red liquid and left the rest for the soil to feed on. Then, he brought the obsidian blood vine over and placed it in the mortar. Next, he poured one of the liquid bottles on them and handed the pestle to his brother. Ground them slowly together into a mixture. When you feel some resistance, like the mixture is hardening, pour another bottle of prismatic elixir. Levi instructed, don't stop until the mixture has turned into a sticky mess. Above all else, don't use too much force. Say less. Arthur cracked his fingers and got to work immediately, using his raw strength to break the plant into pieces without an ounce of resistance. Meanwhile, Levi went to prepare for the next stage. Ashkral, are you here? Levi called telepathically. What? Ashkral was currently in the shadow dimension to avoid any unnecessary problems. While he couldn't see what Levi was doing, they could converse telepathically. I just want to double-check about heating the distillation chamber. Levi asked, 5 to 10 minutes is too broad. Give me a precise time. It's broad because it doesn't matter as long as you remain within the recommended period. Ashkral chided in annoyance. Boy, I gave you all the information you need. Follow them to a T and you won't have any problems. I was just double-checking, asshole. Levi cursed under his breath and stopped reaching for Ashkral. Although he was given all the necessary information, Levi wanted to be as precise as possible. He knew that a simple mistake in any of the 3 stages of creating an evolutionary formula would put both Shia and Bleeder into a whole world of agony. That's because the final formula's job wasn't to break through the plateau like it was some sort of magical elixir. It was used as a way to unseal the stagnated evolutionary traits based on the materials used for the formula. Then, the Shadow Life seed would take it from there and evolve the Nightcrawler through the chosen, unsealed evolutionary traits. If the formula were flawless, all the evolutionary traits from Tier 2 to Tier 3 would be unsealed, allowing the Shadow Life seed to commence the so-called perfect evolution. If it was great, but not perfect, a high number of evolutionary traits would be unlocked while the remaining ones would be sealed forever. This was called remarkable evolution. Last but not least, if the formula was basic and was created just for the sake of breaking through the plateau, it would result in the dreaded limited evolution. In this case, the Shadow Life seed forced the only available evolutionary path on its hosts, regardless of whether it was any good. Since Levi promised a perfect evolution, he had to be flawless in the creation process. Big bro, I think I'm done. Arthur shared while looking at the messy, dark green mixture. Levi went to the mixture and took a deep breath. The moment a revolting acidic scent assaulted him, he nodded in approval. Good job, it's perfect. Phew, what's next? Arthur sighed in relief. Although he knew that the contract terms had changed and his brother's life was not in danger, he still didn't want to disappoint Shia. We have finished with the first stage, Formula Foundation. Now it's time for the second stage, Essence Extraction. It's usually the hardest stage in the creation process of the evolutionary formula. But fortunately, we are required to just vaporize and purify. Levi shared. I have no clue what you just said. Arthur shrugged his shoulders. Just tell me what I need to do. No, you will learn. The evolutionist career has a massive role in the advancement of our society. Without them, most daywalkers would be stagnated at lower levels for a very long time. This means our strength as regions would crumble, and we wouldn't have what it takes to deal with the spreading infestation of Nightcrawlers. Don't forget, we might be protected under the holy light, but we still need the natural resources from the wastelands to survive. You think such an important subject won't be included in the intelligence trials during the assembly? When Arthur realized that his performance in the assembly might be impacted by this, he locked in immediately and requested his brother's explanation. Essence extraction is the most vital and complex stage simply because there are hundreds of ways to extract the essence of each mixture. Levi shared serenely while pouring the mixture into the boiling flask very carefully. Each mixture requires its own method that works best with its essence extraction. In our case, we are lucky since we just vaporized the mixture into a purified liquid. A process that would have been a bit complex for amateurs if we weren't using some of the most advanced equipment in the region. I see. So the job is to extract the essence of the materials and make a purified liquid out of them. Arthur asked as he watched the mixture release vapor. which was turning into red drops. They were trickling into a small glass bottle. "I am not," Ashkral said seriously. "Why do you think I have chosen you? Your situation is far too compatible with my unique seed. Without eyes, the void seed will be able to extract the dark energy residing within the spiritual bridge of darkness." Wait, we are in the presence of dark energy now. How come this is the first time I am hearing about it? Levi raised an eyebrow in surprise as he extended his senses around him, trying to feel it, but failing every time. Because dark energy can be utilized only by those with bloodline or evolutionary traits related to it. Across the entire shadow dimension, only a few remaining royal bloodlines with its affinity are still alive. You may not possess as great of an affinity as them, but your permanent exposure to the spiritual darkness bridge since childhood has helped you improve your affinity. Ashkral clarified, "This is a unique trait only you humans have. In the case of night crawlers, it doesn't matter if they spent their entire lives in a different environment. They won't be able to grow an affinity for that said environment. They're locked with what they are born with." Levi nodded in understanding as he had read about this subject in great detail in his mother's textbooks. He understood that night crawlers came with seemingly infinite types of species, each one stranger than the other. Some species had amazing affinities to poison, sand, earth, wind, ice, and some even had affinities to peculiar elements such as fog, glass, bones, gold, and such. The only elements the night crawlers were cursed to not wield were the ones related to light, such as fire, magma, lightning, or even plants. It wasn't like they couldn't wield them exactly, but they could not produce light radiation. For example, lightning would become dark lightning, or normal flames would turn into black flames. Just like the black wooden umbrella, it was created out of wood, but it was dead black wood that could not absorb light at all. With the void seed, you will be more than capable of tapping into this infinite source of dark energy and use it to slowly feed it or even refuel it to utilize its related abilities. Ashkral added, "That sounds good, but what am I supposed to do with the other two seeds?" Levi frowned. "Since I need to keep growing them simultaneously, this means I need to be just as good at cultivating them as well." Levi's concerns were in place. He understood that while the void seed would not be lacking in the energy department, he couldn't replicate the same consistency with the other two seeds, especially the sun seed. After all, it was more or less similar to Shadow Life seed as it needed sunlight to grow, and this was one of Levi's greatest struggles without eyes. "Don't worry, my nine senses seed can grow by feeding it any source of energy available. It accepts everything and rejects none. However, since it can feed on everything, it requires tenfold the amount of energy when compared to the other two seeds." Ashkral shared, "Any type of energy?" Levi was amazed. Levi understood that the world and the shadow dimension were filled with all sorts of peculiar potent energy sources, which were still being studied as they were speaking. If he could grow those energy sources, his nine senses seed would be dealt with properly too. What about the sun seed? Levi knitted his eyebrows, knowing that it was the only seed that Ashkral shouldn't have a solution for unless he wanted him to grow through abusing growth totems and such sources. While it was doable, Levi knew he would need to hunt down night crawlers 24/7 to collect their crystallized seeds and trade them for solar aegis coins. Even then, he wouldn't be able to secure a constant supply of growth totems since the solar aegis sanctuary used a unique system, where their resources were handled based on each holy region's rank. The Holy Heliodor's region rank worldwide was somewhat in the lower middle of the barrel, which meant their quota for all types of totems was extremely limited. Because of this, the government ensured the purchase of most of their stock and resold it to the rest of the daywalkers at an increased price of solar aegis coins. Yet, the described situation was the most favorable. In reality, the government prioritized selling the best of totems to private agencies, lineage families, governors, and anyone with a connection to the government, like the Anti-Sleepwalkers Department, the Outpost Defenders, and such. In simpler terms, obtaining totems was an extremely difficult and pricey endeavor. That was why Jamal and Sergio were pissed at the thought of employing them as bait. You have been taught your entire life that without eyes, You're a failure as a daywalker. Ashkral said bitterly. Poor thing. You have no idea what you are truly capable of. But you were one of the main people abusing me cause of it, making me remember every day how foolish of me to dream of becoming a daywalk. Sheesh, there was no such a thing. Ashkral shushed Levi with a wing near his spiritual mouth. Then he said, all I did was try to motivate you. Look at how far you came. Levi's eyebrows twitched at his shamelessness. For anyone else, losing their eyes might be considered as the end of their daywalker's dream, but you are different. Levi knitted his eyebrows in intrigue. Different? Are you saying this to make me feel good? You know that's one thing I will never do. Ashkral frowned, acting like he was insulted by his remark. True, your mouth is disabled when it comes to compliments. Levi nodded. Have you ever wondered why your eyes were stolen? Ashkral suddenly asked. Have you wondered why no eye replacement surgery worked on you, even with all the technological development? Every single day, Levi squinted his scorch marks. After a thorough digging into the public data in the network, Levi had found some information that showed his situation wasn't quite unique. It was the signature motto of an infamous hidden organization called the Duskbound Order. He had heard that they were mainly employed as hitmen and assassins to high-profile daywalkers or civilians. Once the deed was completed, they would either remove the eyes of the next living entity to the target, whether it was a child, an animal, a maid, or even an unrelated stranger. If no one but the target was available, they would remove the eyes of the corpse. This was everything he knew about them, and one of his goals was to reach a higher authoritative status to find their classified data and know who had put a target on his parents. As for the eye replacement surgery, the doctors had already tried everything on Levi when he was a child, and nothing worked. Even Arthur had volunteered to donate one of his eyes for Levi, so both of them would have a chance at seeing the world. Unfortunately, even when they were blood-related, his eyes weren't compatible with Levi's. In fact, nothing was. This peculiar situation had driven the doctors to seek a different alternative, such as a cybernetic eye. Yet, to their shock, his body rejected it as well. It was like his body wanted only his stolen eyes and nothing else. Not even using high-grade recovery totems was able to regrow his eyes. While I don't know if the Duskbound Order were targeting your parents, and you ended up as collateral damage, I do know one thing. Ashkral dropped a bombshell calmly. Your bloodline may not be 100% human, and there's a chance they have found out about it. Huh. Levi was startled. Shia glanced at her friends one last time before closing her eyes, focusing her spiritual vision on her shadow life seed. Next, she pulled the red jacket sleeve to her elbow, exposing an ink tattoo of a flying serpent manta with two tails striking out of the tattoo's border. It was illuminated faintly with crimson color, informing her that she had reached her breakthrough point. If she were to press on it without drinking the evolutionary formula first, the seed would force a much worse version of limited evolution. The Daywalkers called it a brochy evolution since it was free, and anyone stupid enough to consider it deserved to be called a brochy. It was as if the seed offered its hosts a choice: accept the bare minimum, or strive to enhance the quality of their evolution by mastering the formulas. Shia pressed on the inked tattoo, and immediately, both her consciousness and bleeders were sent inside her shadow life seed's rooted plane. It didn't need just the touch, but her willingness to undergo the breakthrough, which meant it couldn't get activated by a mistake. What stood before them was nowhere near what Levi had witnessed. An above-average-sized golden tree with a shadowy, deathly reflection on the bottom. Shia was used to this sight already. She sat on the still waters and watched as the tree's branches started to move towards her and bleed her, akin to tentacles. In no time, the branches got hold of them, making it seem like they were going through some freaky bondage play. But in reality, the tree was reading through all of their evolutionary traits at their correct level. If a Daywalker chose the limited breakthrough, the tree would activate only the most prominent evolutionary traits during its scanning phase. But now that Shia had consumed the evolutionary formula, it had already done its magic and had unsealed every possible evolutionary trait of Bleeder and was running its diagnostic on the best evolutionary path fitting them. This made the Shadow Life tree keep activating everything in its path, akin to a traffic officer slapping tickets on every car's window in a parking lot. While this was happening on the inside, Levi and the others were shown a completely different sight. Shia's tattoo was releasing a bright crimson light akin to a bat signal, while her short hair started turning crystallized at the very bottom, making it seem like she was wearing ruby gemstones on each hair strand. Meanwhile, Bleeder was the one truly undergoing evolution under the envious looks of Oro, Othner, and Levi's captivated gaze. Bleeder was encircled by long, swirling strings of inscriptions, forming a spinning ring of shifting symbols. Each time one of the glowing strings pulsed, his form twisted, mutating, reshaping. Again and again, the process repeated until the original serpent manta hybrid, with shimmering red scales, transformed. Now, Bleeder bore 3 massive crystallized scarlet stones jutting from his back, twin crystalline horns on his head, and a long, sinuous tail made entirely of the same scarlet crystal, gleaming with raw, refined power. When the process concluded, the strings snapped off one by one until Bleeder was freed from their containment. Bleeder had no idea about what happened to him, since his consciousness was also locked in the rooted plane. But after the evolution concluded and the tree's branches pulled away, they immediately woke up. "It's over," Shia murmured as she glanced at her dimming tattoo. When she looked up at her friends and saw the weird looks she was getting, she couldn't help but tilt her head in confusion. "What's the matter with you? Did something grow in my face?" She reached out to her face with a dreadful tone, knowing that perfect evolutions almost always result in a mutation spreading to the contracted human. The number of mutations and their quality depended on the Daywalker's rank. Before anyone could say anything, Shia's fingers brushed past the crystallized tips of her hair strands. When she pulled them close to her face, her eyes couldn't help but sparkle in joy. "Kaya, so cute." She swiftly stood up and brought out a mirror from her side bag, eyeing her mutated hair with a wide grin. "I can use this as an excuse to grow my hair." Jamal and the other's eyelids twitched at the sight of Shia, focusing on her hair more than the breakthrough. Ow! They decided to entertain her. Mutations are mostly useful, so those gem-like strands can be used in battles. I am certain about it. Jamal and Sergio nodded in agreement, as they had also heard about this. Since mutations were already rare and appeared mostly in the later stages of one's evolutionary path, most of them were geared for combat. It was like the seed ensured that the mutation chosen wouldn't be a liability or a mere cosmetic. Meanwhile, Levi was having a different conversation with the Nightcrawler squad, whispering under his breath. "How do you feel?" "Never better." Bleeder flexed his massive 3-back rubies under the jealous looks of his friends. He also had the widest grin he could muster as he could feel the tremendous increase in strength compared to his previous breakthrough. Daywalker's main source of strength wasn't the mutations, the signature weapon, the battle arts, or even the innate abilities. It was the steady increase in physical and mental prowess during one's cultivation, as each stage completed implied a smaller boost in strength. When a Daywalker broke through a plateau and evolved, the strength enhancement was considerably higher based on the quality of the evolution. Since Bleeder went through a perfect evolution, he obtained the highest possible form of enhancement in his rank. If Shia wasn't preoccupied with her hair, she would have noticed the difference too. "Congratulations on your evolution." Levi smiled serenely. "I am happy for you guys." "Thank you, little one." Bleeder went to Levi and gave him a solemn look. "If you need anything from me, don't hesitate to ask. Much appreciated, but you don't have to feel indebted." Levi shook his head. "We had a deal, and I simply carry my part of it." "I know and I don't care. I owe you one." Bleeder smirked. "Once you become a Daywalker, you will understand the true magnitude of your favor." Levi could only respond with a quiet smile, fully aware that for Nightcrawlers, evolution was everything. Guiding one through a perfect evolution from one tier to the next meant unlocking new layers of potential. If he continued along this path, however slim, there was a chance he could one day reach the final tiers. After taking a moment to admire her hair, Shia stepped up to Levi and thanked him for staying true to his word. With a rare softness in her tone, she told him not to hesitate if he ever needed her help, offering it freely, without conditions. Hearing the offer, Levi realized that he did need help with something and it would be less troublesome with Shia's. Well, you guys know my brother and I are planning to participate in this year's assembly, but I won't lie to you, we kind of need help concerning combat. Levi requested, "It will be great if you can give us some pointers and such." That's it. Shia rolled her eyes. "We already had plans on training you guys. You were foolish if you thought we were going to throw you at the assembly like this." Jamal supported. "As long as I get the chance to beat Arthur, I am down." Sergio cracked his knuckles with a wicked grin, sending shivers down Arthur's spine. "What did I do?" Arthur cried inwardly. "Much appreciated, truly." Levi smiled. Although he knew that Ashcrow already had plans to train him, Levi wanted to be more proactive. He understood that Shia had the resources to prepare them more efficiently for the assembly, such as weapons, training grounds, battle experience, and more. Meanwhile, Ashcrow might be a monster, but Levi recognized that he might be a bit out of touch with matters related to his current level. With him being a true asshole, he could already see him cursing all of his generations for failing his tasks. Plus, it would help him mask his newfound strength now that he could utilize echolocation in battles, giving him a new edge. "So, what kind of ultimate ability have you unlocked?" Jamal returned to Shia's breakthrough, asking her with an intrigued tone. Levi and the others' ears perked up in anticipation as well, knowing that besides the normal innate abilities unlocked at each stage, they were capable of unlocking an ultimate ability after each evolution. Those ultimate abilities were considered the best possible abilities for each tier. That's because the Shadow Life Seed combined the mastered innate abilities to create the best possible ultimate ability in each rank. In this manner, not even the Nightcrawler would know what kind of ultimate ability it would be. Of course, the grade of the evolution played a big part in the ultimate quality of the ultimate ability. It's better to show you. Let's go to the agency's training center. Sometime later, Levi and Arthur found themselves standing before the Blood Hunters Agency's Tamara branch. While it wasn't as glamorous and big as the headquarters in the capital, it still oozed with overwhelming dominance. As Levi watched the Daywalkers walk in and out with varying auras and unique nightcrawlers, he felt like this was his call. Joining a powerful agency and going out on adventures, participating in raids, expeditions, and winning back territory to honor his region. He might be intelligent, but Levi was still a hot-blooded teenager who grew up reading all about the heroism of Daywalkers. If avenging his parents was his destined goal, then the Daywalker's life was his dream, as it made him feel like it was the only way for him to escape from his disability. "Don't be shy, my people don't bite." Well, most of them. She had chuckled as she led the Larson brothers inside the agency's branch. After going in, Shia was greeted by everyone on their way to the training center. Levi and Arthur had caught some attention, too, especially Levi, but no one came to bother them. Not even Nightcrawlers. Being with the daughter of Lord Idris was enough to tame everyone's arrogance. A few minutes later, Shia and the others entered a massive, sealed training ground, which was separated into dozens of smaller areas. Each area had its own door and needed a permission slip to rent it for some training, testing abilities, or even sparring between Daywalkers. However, Shia ignored those closed-occupied doors and went straight to the end of the corridor. She walked to a big stainless steel door with a small keypad on its side. Then, she scanned it with her neural lens, and access was granted immediately. Just as the door was about to slide open, Levi alerted Shia, "Someone is already occupying the room." It can't be." Shia raised an eyebrow in confusion. She knew that this room was exclusive to her father, and only his children had access to it. Her big brother was out on a mission while her father was in the capital. Or at least, that's what she believed. As the door slid fully open, Shia's pupils narrowed at the sight of a giant specimen swinging a great sword in a monotonous and repeated motion. The man was well above 2 meters in height, and his bronze, sweaty muscles were big enough to make even Arthur reconsider if he was truly putting in the work in the gym. Every time he took a step, it left a faint imprint on the ground, his sheer mass making the steel floorboards groan beneath his weight. When he noticed their presence, he stopped mid-swing and slowly turned his head to face them. Everyone gulped a mouthful after his piercing, dark hunter eyes landed on them. His face was chiseled and decorated with a thick scarlet mustache and a long scar running from his forehead to his left cheek. Adding his short red buzz cut made him ooze with uncontrollable barbaric masculinity. One look was enough for anyone to reach this judgment. He was the man. "Greetings, Lord Idris." Sergio and Jamal immediately bowed their heads in respect, feeling a sense of awe at the notion of meeting their leader face to face. Although they hung around Shia a lot, they were still mere combatant members at the bottom of the ladder in their agency. This limited their meeting with Lord Idris greatly. "Dad, what are you doing here?" Meanwhile, Shia asked coldly with her arms crossed on her chest, not bothering to greet him. "Do I need a reason to be in my training room?" Lord Idris asked calmly.